Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги, дорогие друзья. 14:00 по европейскому времени, а стало быть 15 по московскому. И мы, в соответствии с нашим графиком, регламентом, начинаем научную конференцию, которая у нас называется «Космическая отрасль. История, настоящее и перспектива развития в будущем». Инициатива этой конференции исходила от представительства Росsotrудnicheства в Дании, но я бы хотел поблагодарить и моих коллег. Прежде всего, я хочу поблагодарить Ирину Бjørnø, ее культурную миссию в Дании, русская культурная миссия, также наших друзей из Датско-Российской ассоциации, с которыми мы тоже плотно сотрудничаем, а также моих коллег, русские дома, представительство Росsotrудnicheства в Италии, в Бельгии, во Франции, в Люксембурге, всех моих коллег, уважаемых директоров и их коллектив, которые предоставили от своих государств спикеров для сегодняшней конференции. Мы сегодня с вами отмечаем юбилей, 60 лет полета, первого полета человека в космос, Юрия Алексеевича Гагарина. Это было 12 апреля 1961 года. Вот 5 лет назад, в честь 55-летия, мы установили памятник в Дании на территории Национального института космоса Датского технического университета. Мы открыли памятник Юрию Алексеевичу Гагарину, который до сих пор, естественно, находится в прекрасном состоянии, и с утра всегда Российский центр науки и культуры, посольство Российской Федерации, сотрудники военного атташата и торгового представительства возлагают вместе с датскими коллегами цветы к этому памятнику. Такая устраивается торжественная линейка. Так вот, 5 лет назад на открытии памятника присутствовали наши замечательные космонавты. Это Аннес Могесен, первый датский космонавт, и Сергей Волков, его коллега, командир экипажа, с которым они стартовали с Байконура в свое время в космос. Я бы хотел предоставить слово Андреасу, надеюсь, он с нами на связи, для начала и открытия, по сути, нашей конференции. Андреас, добрый день, рад вас видеть.
Добрый день и спасибо. I will switch to English, I hope, because that's what I've prepared my presentation in. It's an honor to be here today and to help celebrate the anniversary, the 60th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's first flight and the first flight of any human into space. Let me see if I can share my screen. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes.
Excellent. So as I was saying, it's an honor to be and to be able to join you on the 60th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's first flight and the first flight of a human into space. I thought about Yuri Gagarin during my own mission. Shortly after we launched, about 8.5 minutes after launch, we reached orbit. And for the first time, I had a chance to look out of the window and look down at our Earth. I didn't see Denmark like on this picture because we were over the Pacific Ocean, but I did see a beautiful sight. And I wondered what that moment must have been like for Gagarin 60 years earlier. You know, his experience was a lot different than mine. I was with 2 other colleagues. I don't even know what number Soyuz launch. There had been a lot of Soyuz launches before me. We had a lot of knowledge and confidence in our vehicle. For Gagarin, as the first human ever to travel into space, he was alone in many ways. He was also alone on board his spacecraft. And so I wondered how he must have been feeling and what he must have thought about sitting there all by himself in space as the first human being ever. It was quite an achievement 60 years ago for Gagarin and the entire Soviet space industry. Of course, when you launch with Soyuz into space, you learn a lot about the Soviet and Russian space history and of course Gagarin's first flight. Most of the training takes place at the Yuri Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in Star City, which is a very unique and very special place. You get a real sense of the history of human spaceflight by training there. Star City is also a very unique place. If Yuri Gagarin had been alive today, it's not hard to imagine that he perhaps also would still be living in Star City. Some of the other cosmonauts, you still see them from time to time, including Valentina Tereshkova and Alexei Leonov, who very surprisingly came to our farewell breakfast in September, or it was August 2015. You know, there are a lot of traditions involved with flying into space, and one of them is that on the last day you have a breakfast in Star City, and a lot of people involved with the program come out to say goodbye. And one of the people who came out to say goodbye to us and our team was Alexei Leonov. So Star City is a very, very special place, not just in the history of Russian spaceflight, but also today. And you really get a sense of all that history when you're training there and spending so much time learning about the Soyuz vehicle and everything else with the Soviet space industry. Baikonur, of course, is also a remarkable place. It's, of course, the place Yuri Gagarin also launched from. And there, too, you get a sense of what it must have been like 60 years ago. We had another very special connection to Gagarin's first flight. Our flight was the number 500 from the same launch pad that Yuri Gagarin launched from. Now, there haven't been 500 Soyuz flights, but flights in total, including Progress, our launch was number 500 from that very launch pad that Gagarin launched from. So an incredible amount of knowledge and experience, both in Star City, but also at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. And you really appreciate what an incredibly, in many ways, sophisticated and robust rocket the Soyuz vehicle is. And it was a real pleasure to fly together with Sergei Volkov and Aydin Ambietov on our flight to the International Space Station. Many of the activities that occur pre-flight in Baikonur are a tradition that dates back to Gagarin's first flight. In the days leading up to the launch, we do many of the same things that at least we're told that Gagarin did, including planting a tree. So every member of the mission plants a tree in Baikonur, and you have the whole alley of trees from previous astronauts and cosmonauts that have launched from Baikonur. And there are a whole series of other traditions that you go through on the way to launch, all or many of them at least dating back to Gagarin's first mission in 1961. In Denmark, many ways, at least in the modern time, the space flight started with the ionosphere laboratory at the Technical University in Denmark, which was involved in sounding rocket flights from Norway. And that's also one of the reasons why Denmark in 1964 joined the European Space Research Organization, ESRO, which was one of the preliminary organizations that formed ESA in 1975. And so Denmark, together with 9 other European countries, were part of the founding member states of ESA. So Denmark has been part of ESA from the beginning, which is something that we can be very proud of. And ESA today, of course, is the premier spaceflight organization in Europe. It has grown from 10 member states to more than 22 European member states. And we're involved in all sorts of activities outside of human spaceflight. So it's not just human spaceflight, but we have a wide portfolio of activities related to space exploration and the study of Earth. Denmark was also one of the founding member states to join the International Space Station project in 1998. The International Space Station, of course, started as a collaboration between the United States and Russia. And then other countries were invited to join, including ESA. And Denmark was again one of the original 10 countries of ESA to join the International Space Station project. So also there, we've been involved for, or since the beginning of that project. In terms of human research or human spaceflight research, Denmark's also been involved for many years, prior even to the launch of the International Space Station in 1998. Denmark has had a very well-established program of cardiovascular research led by Peter Norsk that included experiments on the Space Shuttle D2 mission and also on the ESA Euromir mission. On top of that, we also have a Danish company today called Danish Aerospace Company, previously called DAMIC, and before that Innovision, that has developed exercise equipment, including the cycle ergometer that was used first on the Space Shuttle and now also on the International Space Station. So we do have quite some experience, even though it took a long time before we got our first astronaut. The first class of ESA astronauts you see on the left-hand side, 3 Europeans were selected by ESA as astronauts in 1978. The next class, which you see on the right, was not selected until 1992. And then the third class, the class that I was part of, was selected in 2009. So even though ESA was established in 1975, we've only had 3 classes of astronauts. And this was the first time that Denmark had a member of the astronaut corps. And personally, of course, I was very, very excited to join ESA as an astronaut and to begin my training for my first mission in 2015. And a lot of that training, as I mentioned, took place in Russia, where I learned everything I could about the Soyuz spacecraft because I had the honor to fly as board engineer number 1, which is the co-pilot of Soyuz. And so I got to train not just with Sergei Volkov, who I launched with, but also with Gennady Padalka, who I landed with. And I learned an incredible amount from those 2 cosmonauts. You know, they're both incredibly experienced. Sergei Volkov's father was also a cosmonaut. And of course, Gennady Padalka is the human with the most time ever spent in space. He has had 5 long duration missions and has spent a cumulative time of more than, I think it's 850 some days in space. So an incredibly, 2 very, very experienced cosmonauts that I had a chance to fly with. And it was a real pleasure to be part of this mission in 2015. Being the first Danish mission, we also had I had a chance to do several Danish experiments. I had a chance to work with upgrades, technological upgrades to the cycle ergometer, which you see here on this picture. This is one of the 3 ways that we can exercise on board the space station. We have a cycle ergometer, we have a treadmill for running, and then we have a strength exercise device. And so DAMIC, we're making some technological improvements in terms of monitoring heart rates that I had a chance to test during my mission. I also had a chance to work on some water recycling technology developed by a Danish company called Aquapoint. We try to reuse all of the water on board the space station, which means that more than 95% of the wastewater is recycled and turned into drinking water again. And this is a new type or new way to recycle water using an osmotic membrane. And so I had a chance to work on the first iteration of this technology, which hopefully we will see used on board the space station in the future. I also had a chance to work on a Danish atmosphere experiment called Thor. It's now called ASIM, which involved taking pictures of gigantic lightning strikes. These are giant lightning that shoot outwards to space rather than down towards the Earth. They're also called blue jets and red sprites because of the color. I was asked to try to take pictures of this from the space station, and I have to admit I was a little bit skeptical because I've never seen personally a blue jet or a red sprite before. But I was lucky enough to take this picture and actually capture it on video, which is the first time that we've captured a blue jet like this. This was probably the highlight of my mission, one of the most exciting times to be able to capture a phenomenon like this, which has contributed to our knowledge of our planet. There is now a Danish experiment called ASIM that's part of the space station that continuously monitors the atmosphere for blue jets and red sprites. And they have recently been both on the cover of Nature magazine and also Science magazine. So a very, very successful Danish experiment on board the space station, where I had a chance to do a preliminary experiment in 2015, prior to ASIM arriving in 2018. And Denmark is now, or not Denmark, but ESA is now looking for a new class of astronauts. So this will be the first new class since I started in 2009. We are currently accepting applications from all of ESA's member states from all of Europe. Those applications are open until the 28th of May. So who knows, I might not be the only Danish astronaut for much longer. If we are lucky, Denmark will have a second astronaut. But of course, there's a tremendous amount of competition, and ESA is only looking for maybe 4 or 5 new astronauts to join the astronaut corps. The future is incredibly exciting for this new class of astronauts. Our international cooperation on board the International Space Station will continue for many more years, I'm certain. But at the same time, we're preparing for the future. We are preparing to return to the moon. And also we are working on preparing for one day in the future sending humans to Mars. So a very, very exciting future ahead of us, which European astronauts will have an opportunity to participate in, especially the new class that we are currently selecting. But as we move forward into the future, we of course remember our history and look back with pride at the first human spaceflight ever by Gagarin in 1961. And I was happy, as was said in the introductory remarks, to help unveil a bust of Yuri Gagarin at the Danish Technical University on the 1-year anniversary of my flight, together with my commander, Sergei Volkov, in Denmark at the Technical University. So a very, very exciting future in space, not just for humanity, but also for ESA and for Denmark. And was happy to be able to join you here this morning to open this conference on the 60th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's flight. So with those words, I wish you a good conference. And I hope you enjoy the remainder of the speakers today. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Андреас, за прекрасный доклад. Удачи, мы рады видеть и всегда рады встрече с вами. Спасибо. Дорогие друзья, мы продолжаем нашу конференцию. К нам подключается Москва. И после доклада Андреса мы послушаем Дмитрия Владимировича Лоскутова, который является генеральным директором АО «Главкосмос». Это дочерняя компания госкорпорации «Роскосмос». Он расскажет о современном состоянии российской космонавтики, о перспективных международных проектах, о всем том, что наиболее сегодня актуально и интересно нашему зрителю, слушателю, для того, чтобы понимать, как мы развиваемся. Пожалуйста, Дмитрий Владимирович, вам слово.
Thank you very much, distinguished participants, dear friends. Hello and welcome. Hello and greetings from Moscow. We have a great sunny weather today, celebrating this anniversary. Let me try to see if I can switch on the screen demonstration, and you could be able. Can you see the title slide? Hopefully, yes. Yes. All right. So Glavkosmos is a commercial arm of Roscosmos. We were created in 1985, and in fact, I'm going to speak today. But will not spend too much time, but to concentrate just on major things, including space tourism, something that we have been tasked by Roscosmos last year. You know that there are more and more spacecraft appearing. Well, more and more means 1 + 1, basically two more. Today, flying in an uncrewed mode. One of them is already in a crewed mode. It's Crew Dragon, and another one, Starliner, which is being built by Boeing. So we have more spare seats on our spacecraft, and we are getting back to the commercial space flights. But let's start from the how do I switch this next slide? All right, here you can see the updated information that we were managed to collect on the current Russian orbital satellite constellation. You can see we do not have military satellites here, of course, but it's hard to tell exactly how many we got. But normally, yes, much of them are telecom satellites. You see 38, and a little bit less we have for Earth observation. But basically, it's around 100 satellites today operating. I must say the low Earth orbit is pretty much crowded today. We've got, I think, several thousand satellites in total operating and out of operation. So the issue of the space debris is pretty much on the agenda now, even getting all the way up to the United Nations. This is the launch vehicles that we have in operation today. I did not put Soyuz 2.1V here because it's not commercially available. It's basically a light version of Soyuz without side boosters. You can see the light Angara 1.2. It is expected to fly this year, and we've got 1 or 2 heavy Angaras expected to fly this year as well from the Plesetsk spaceport in northern Russia. In fact, Angara A5 will gradually replace a heavy Proton vehicle, the mighty Proton, which still is expected to have several flights, including this year. Soyuz 2 launch vehicles, you see the Soyuz 2.1A with a sort of a small tower on the top. This tower is an emergency escape system. So this is how you distinguish a piloted version, a crewed version of Soyuz from the cargo version of Soyuz, which is at the left. There is another, yes, I've already mentioned the major event that the Angara A5 started flying after a long period that it was, so let's put it this way, a little bit upgraded. So its crewed modification, Angara A5P, which means its piloted version, is expected to fly from Rossotrudnichestvo spaceport in the end of 2023, carrying another new one spacecraft, which is called Oriole, which is being now under development at the Energia Corporation. Now, these are some prospective launch vehicles, and most interesting for me and for us as Glavkosmos, as a commercial operator, is Soyuz SPG, which is called Amur. It is now designed by the Progress rocket plant, and it should be the first Russian reusable methane-powered launch vehicle. Why methane? Well, it will receive a reusable first stage. It is expected to be launched from Vostochny Spaceport as well, starting from 2026. And the good news about it is that it has been designed for the first time to meet a specific launch cost around 20+ million US dollars. So we expect it to be pretty competitive on the market. And besides that, it will have a 5-meter fairing, something that our customers are asking us to do for quite a long time. The regular fairings are 4 meters. So this rocket will, with the reusable first stage, will be launching up to 10.5 tons of payload. It says 9 here, but the figures are changing, into LEO compared to 8.5 by Soyuz rockets. Another good thing is that it will have a fully automatic launch pad, so people won't be involved in any operation. It's like a Zenith rocket, basically. Angara has the automated launch pad as well. So Soyuz 5 is basically a reincarnation of Zenith rocket, 2-stage rocket with very powerful boosters. Super heavy class rocket, as you may expect. It's needed not only for the flights to the moon, it's also necessary for launching large-sized heavy space structures, including to the low Earth orbit. But once again, as it happens, both in the Russian space industry, in the US, in the European space industry, the concepts keep changing over the years. So we'll see which baseline rockets will be used to create the super heavy class. This is our, yes, the newest Russian spaceport. Some of these launch pads are under construction. In fact, the only launch pad that is functioning today is for Soyuz 2, but the works for constructing launch pad for Angara heavy vehicle are in full swing. The super heavy, they have not started constructing it yet, but it's planned. A couple of words about our great plans for moon exploration. I think we've messed up a little bit. The consequences, the figures should have been put in in the correct way, in a logical format, clockwise. But anyway, this year is going to be really interesting for us in terms of moon program. In more than 40 years, I think, we are launching an automatic system, Lunar Globe spacecraft to the moon, which is supposed to land to test the landing system in the South Pole of the moon. And we have not done that since the Soviet Union times. And in order to keep the program going, ideally, we should be launching something nearly every year. So this is the plan, including, as I mentioned, the flight to the International Space Station as a first step in an unmanned version of Oriole spacecraft. And then up to 2030, well, it says here 2029, 2030 for a manned mission to the moon. I think it's a bit optimistic. Most probably we will be flying in 2030 plus. I'm just traditionally trying to be more skeptical maybe than needed, but maybe. Now a couple of words on commercial human space flights. So this is a very specific market, but Glavkosmos was in fact the company which have contracted Toyohiro Akiyama in 1990, a Japanese journalist who flew to the Mir station. We consider him to be the first civil astronaut, although he did not use his own money to pay for his flight. It was the Tokyo Broadcast Corporation. After him, Helen Sharman went to the Mir station, and then we've had, I think, 7 or 8 flights, eight commercial flights to the International Space Station, starting from Denis Tito in 2001, and I think the last flight was in 2009. Yes, so we have been the main international contract coordinator since 1985. This is what is normally propose for a commercial space traveler, including some options which you see in the right part of this chart. And I must say that there is still a chance to get into the first 10 of commercial space travelers, and maybe even to be the first to try a spacewalk. No one ever so far has left the spaceship or the ISS to go into the outer space, not being a professional astronaut. This is something interesting. I mean, this is something very expensive, as well, because it will need a special suit to go into the outer space, and most probably, well, not most probably, it's 100% possibility that we will need to use a cargo spacecraft, a Progress spacecraft, to carry this suit to the station. I mean, it will not be the only cargo at the spacecraft, but still it will cost a little bit more, I guess, including to train the commercial tourists to go into the outer space. Well, this is some nerdy stuff for medical examination. Learn the do's and don'ts. Well, don't try to crack the station. I guess there will be some basic instructions. We've seen some funny elements in commercial movies when the Russians are trying to fix the station by using a hammer or something. I guess this is not what we are going to teach our tourists to do. This is the Soyuz launch vehicle. So how are you going to get to space? In the safest way possible. That system that you see on the top, I think it has worked 3 times in its history, and every time it saved the lives of the cosmonauts. Some animation, I hope you can see it as well. And this is the spacecraft, the Soyuz spacecraft, which has 2 compartments. You know, journalists or even professional experts from the space industry tend to compare sometimes Soyuz with a Crew Dragon. Well, yes, Crew Dragon is a little bit more spacey. I would say it's painted white, yes, nice and beautiful. But the pro of Soyuz, a part of its price, is also the second compartment, which can be used for, you know, some different purposes that sometimes you need to do when flying into space. Although now it takes less time to fly to the ISS than you fly from Moscow to Brussels, for example. It's like 2 hours, several minutes. Residence. Well, I think no need to talk a lot about what the International Space Station is. We just recently celebrated its 20th anniversary. Hopefully it will be functioning until at least 2028. We know that discussions are in place today. And here is the Russian segment. And on the next chart, we can see the future Russian segment. Another milestone event will be taking place this year is the launch of multifunctional laboratory model or multi-purpose laboratory model Nauka to the ISS. Hopefully it will be launched in this summer. And it will be followed by Prichal, it's a docking module, and then the scientific and power module. I cannot tell exactly which year it will be. Hopefully not maybe if not next year, maybe the year after that. And that will prepare the grounds for a separately functioning Russian segment in case ISS will be, the mission of ISS will be terminated, if and when. Well, it's not a matter of a question of if, rather a question of when. And this is some stuff that people are asking what I'm going to do at the space station. Well, there are some things to do, and the most important thing probably is that when a commercial space traveler returns back to Earth, he's able to capitalize his experience. I mean, do some business, to commercialize himself, because he's going to be well known to the whole world, to become a hero. All this is contact information, basically. I'm not sure if anybody from today's audience has made a decision to go into space, because to be practical, today it is still pretty much expensive to go there, but the first commercial space travelers will pave the way for the next travelers, because we are going to invest that monies, the funds that we're receiving from the commercial space missions, to make the flights even cheaper. And we have no other, I mean, no options. It is we have to go this way, although many years we have been staying on the same level, same pricing. It even went higher. Today we have to drop the prices. Hopefully I will be still alive when major part of people will be able not only to wish to go to space, but also to go to space, in fact. Well, that's it. I'm ready to answer questions if you have any. And once again, congratulations with this major milestone in the space history, and looking forward to opening up space for new businesses, for the new space companies. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Дмитрий Владимирович, за такой широкий доклад интересный. Я думаю, вопросы будут. И, соответственно, как бы мы сможем собрать все вопросы. Если кому-то надо подумать, мы их потом тоже перешлем. Может быть, не сразу так быстро аудитория сориентируется. Спасибо большое за участие в конференции. Дорогие друзья, теперь у нас выступают наши летчики-космонавты из России. Это Сергей Авдеев и Сергей Залетин, которые расскажут о пилотируемых программах России и о будущем российской космонавтики.
Да,
а кто там будет?
Сергей Авдеев, Сергей Залетин. Коллеги, вы на связи? Пока не видим наших коллег. Тогда давайте, наверное...
Добрый день всем, все подключаем. С Сергея Васильевича
торопятся, такие тоже у нас
Авдеева. Есть. Да. Подождите, я увидеть хочу.
Ларри Куйко, руководитель программы поддержки стартапов Европейского центра инноваций в области космических ресурсов. Это Брюссель, Бельгия. Ларри, вы на связи?
Вот сейчас я скажу. Добрый день всем, Сергей Васильевич, да? Авдеев на связи.
Вот, пожалуйста, тогда, пожалуйста, Сергей, пожалуйста.
Добрый день. А погромче можно ли? Или сейчас Wi-Fi включить на наушники? Сейчас мы устроимся.
Сергей Авдеев. Коллеги, убедительная просьба подключаться более в таком раннем интервале, чтобы мы могли непрерывно вести конференцию.
Да, добрый день, всех видно, почти всех. У кого-то микрофоны отключены. В всяком случае,
Пожалуйста,
я
Сергей, вам
всех
слово,
вижу.
вам доклад.
Сейчас погромче еще сделаю. Так, а сейчас Bluetooth где-нибудь можно будет найти здесь? Ну ладно. Хорошо. Серега, присоединяйся. Сначала я, ну ладно, хорошо. По очереди. А кто ведущий? Сейчас можно будет микрофон пока выключить.
Сергей, вы нас слышите?
Да, хорошо, слышу, все, спасибо, слышно.
Да, пожалуйста,
нормально.
вам слово, прошу вас.
Хорошо. Ну, я поздравляю всех с юбилейным днем, праздником космонавтики. 60-летний уже такой солидный возраст. С начала полета Гагарина вот столько лет прошло. И сегодня мы его встретили ранним утром в Сочи, точнее, недалеко от Сочи, на таком горнолыжном, не только горнолыжном, курорте, очень так известном в России, Красная Поляна, где проходили Олимпийские зимние игры. Может быть, кто-то приезжал сюда и в качестве зрителя, может быть, кто-то из участник был этих зимних Олимпийских игр. Мы открыли соревнования, посвященные этому дню. И кроме этого мероприятия очень много проходит всяких других торжеств. Не только здесь, в России. Вот сейчас мы очень много представителей из других стран тоже хотели бы как-то отметить этот день, значимый для всех людей, живущих на Земле. Я вот только что вернулся буквально этой ночью из Ямало-Ненецкого округа по приглашению правительства. И мы встречались с жителями города, Салехардом, Надымом.
Салехард.
Несколько городов в Ямало-Ненецком.
In several cities of the Yanana region, they have rather big interest to cosmonautics. And different age people who have interest from kindergarten and to the people of age. I would like to also say to participants of this conference, and I hope in the future that we also can, maybe not only the teleconference, but also conference where we all be present, which is much more interesting than now. But I can come with an example. One of those such meetings, which is unfortunately been cancelled for second year. Yeah. We decided and supported the Thomas Riders initiative to make our celebration of our program of Euromir 95. There were actually several programs, and Thomas Riders flight, as he told about, I'm not imagining Germany, but I'm imagining that the whole union of countries who were preparing this program. Also, John Kim, who was the first German astronaut. He was the organizer, and both in 94 and 95.
К сожалению, он ушел из жизни, но мы его помним, и в этот день юбилейный полета Гагарина вспоминаем и тех, естественно, людей, которые сейчас на орбите находятся, тех, которые ушли из жизни. Каждый год, практически каждый год, но вот опять по причине карантина мы не можем встретиться всеми космонавтами, астронавтами на наших, как мы говорим, планетарных конгрессах. В прошлом году этот конгресс должен был бы быть в Венгрии. Вот символика как раз нашего организации Association of Space Explorers, ассоциации участников космических полетов. В этом году мы надеемся, что все-таки мы проведем в Венгрии, а вот в России, на что мы рассчитывали именно вот в этот юбилейный год провести и собрать всех космонавтов, астронавтов, тайконавтов у себя в России, не получается, будет, очевидно, небольшой сдвиг. Но, тем не менее, еще раз я поздравляю всех с этим днем. И предоставляю слово другим участникам нашей телеконференции.
Спасибо большое за приветствие и поздравления, Сергей. С праздником вас. Это ваш праздник, в очередь. Сергей Залетин есть в эфире конференции? Да, Сергею тоже тогда слово. Да, пожалуйста, Сергей. Пожалуйста, добрый день.
Добрый день всем участникам видеоконференции. Я также присоединяюсь ко всем словам Сергея, который сказал до меня, что хочет всех участников поздравить с Днем космонавтов. Действительно, это большая серьезная дата. Есть что сказать, есть где подвести итоги, есть куда наметить свои дальнейшие планы. Но в преддверии этого серьезного события хочу сказать, что весь российский отряд космонавтов, а это всего лишь навсего 28 действующих космонавтов, все разъехались по стране, по приглашениям, даже несмотря на то, что пандемия, вот собираются на днях буквально снять ограничения с отряда космонавтов. Тем не менее, мы как бы сами до срока это немного сделали. Поэтому вот, буквально позавчера здесь, в городе Сочи, провели теннисный турнир, посвященный 60-летию полета Юрия Гагарина в космос. Провели конференцию со всеми школами города Сочи. Все это проходило под эгидой Государственной Думы, под эгидой депутата Государственной Думы Константина Федоровича Затулина. Народу было очень много, дети очень заинтересованы во встрече с космонавтами. Такой идет массовый ажиотаж. Многие спрашивают, а как вот это получается, чтобы там подрасти, закончить школу, высшее учебное заведение. Вообще, как стать космонавтом? Очень много вопросов. И это, честно говоря, очень и очень радует. В Звездном городке было огромное количество мероприятий торжественных, посвященных Дню космонавтики, Дню 60-летия. Я знаю, что в Калуге открывают новый музей. В Звездном городке там серия концертов, и артисты приезжали, и все космонавты, пенсионеры пришли, кто там дома оставался, не может никуда поехать. Хотя в Звездном городке сейчас проживает не так много, где-то мы посмотрели порядка 10-11 космонавтов, но тем не менее все очень рады, все довольны, все таким с воодушевлением смотрят завтрашний день. Хочу также всем участникам нашей конференции пожелать здоровья, благополучия. В принципе, мы готовы с Сергеем всегда отвечать на какие-то вопросы или что-то рассказывать по конкретной тематике. В целом, потому что вопрос-то глобальный, это пилотируемая программа России. Вот на сегодняшний день в космосе у нас 2 экипажа летает. И, кстати, такой маленький интересный нюанс. Вот предыдущий экипаж, 2 Сергея, Сергей Рыжиков, Сергей Кучер-Сверчков, полетев в космос, они побили рекорд в отношении того, какое имя среди российских космонавтов стало самым популярным. Имя Сергей, потому что сравнялось количество Сергеев и Александров. Очень такая символичная тематика, но тем не менее она такая маленькая, радостная. Поэтому всем хочу пожелать здоровья, благополучия, конечно, побед на наших фронтах пилотируемой космонавтики, потому что пилотируемая космонавтика — это такой локомотив, который тянет за собой всю науку, не только космическую, но и наземную, которая в целом облегчает нам, землянам, жить на Земле. Ну а встречаясь с детьми, я всегда говорю, что любой землянин, который отрывается от пределов земной поверхности, поднимается на высоту 500 километров, видит нашу Землю с этой высоты и понимает, самое главное в этой жизни, что все мы, живущие на Земле, в какой-то степени космонавты, так как летим мы на одном огромном большом корабле, название которого Земля. Поэтому надо, конечно же, хранить и беречь нашу Землю, как сказал Юрий Гагарин. Ну, а мы все продолжатели его славного дела. Еще раз всех с праздником. Здоровья, благополучия. Самое главное — не болеть в наше непростое ковидное время.
Спасибо. Спасибо за теплые слова. С праздником вас, профессиональным праздником, Днем космонавтов.
Спасибо.
Дорогие друзья, теперь опять мы возвращаемся к Ларе Куйко, Центр инноваций в области космических ресурсов. Ларе, вы подключены? Да, вам слово, пожалуйста. Люксембург.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Do you hear me? Yes, okay. So I will just share my presentation right now to talk to you. Just a small minute, difficult to share a document. Just a second, I'm just waiting that they provide me potentially the authorization to share a document, because apparently I cannot.
Как у нас обстановка, Алла? Презентация подключается?
Так как другие спикеры могли, то, соответственно, там тоже должна быть такая функция. Пытаюсь сейчас разобраться с Ларри лично.
Если у нас идет задержка, то давайте, наверное, предоставим слово тем, кто торопится, следующим спикерам, потому что мы не будем, наверное, длинные паузы делать из-за отсутствия времени. Давайте тогда Федерик Марин из Франции, обсерватория города Страсбург, Франция. Федерик, пожалуйста.
All right, thanks. Allow me to share my screen. Right. So first of all, allow me to express my gratitude to the organizers to inviting me to present this work, which will be dedicated to actually the future prospects of space exploration and space industry. This is a very, very long subject, and we already had a very nice introduction and some ideas about the future of space exploration and Moon and Mars exploration already. But let me discuss something which will be in a much further future. So this will be dedicated for the next 20 minutes about deep space travels, their feasibility and their prospect, and how they will impact space exploration and space exploitation. So this work is done on behalf of the heritage team that we present later on and collaborators. And I am Frédéric Marine from the Astronomical Observatory of Strasbourg. I'm an astrophysicist. So before going into the deep into the subject, allow me to give a very extremely brief history of space exploration. And you all know that it's thought to have started in the 1920s, with the fathers of modern aeronautic, Robert Goddard. And in this phase of space exploration, it's a bit of American-centered. So I would like to add someone else before Robert Goddard, who is another founding fathers of space exploration, which is the Russian Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, sorry for my pronunciation, who actually was also, due to his equations and many publications on the subject, one of the fathers of modern rocketry. After that, we had several steps leading to space exploration, and the first manned flight in outer space in 1961, Yuri Gagarin. In addition to his name, and she was already mentioned, I would like to add Valentina Tereshkova, who was the first woman in space in 1963, and she did 48 times the Earth orbit, while Yuri Gagarin only orbited once around the Earth. Both of them led the way for space exploration, and of course, one of the major steps after that was the moon landing, and with Armstrong, Collins, and Aldrin in 1969. Shortly after, and this is much less known, is the foundation of a space station with the Soviet Union space program called Salyut, and with the Salyut 1 monolithic space station, which was dedicated to secret military research. But then there were some Salyut 2, 3, 4, 5, and actually you have here the unique in-space picture of the Salyut 1 mission that was taken aboard the Soyuz 11 mission in 1971. And this monolithic space station is actually 15 meters long. So it was already a big, big piece of metal to put in space. So all of these were done during the last 60 years, including the Mir and ISS space station, the launch of Hubble Space Telescope, and many other very important steps towards solar system exploration. But what's happening right now? You all know that aboard the ISS, there is currently a lot of experiments in medical experiments, biological experiments, technological ones also. You here have the example of the NASA astronaut Karen Nyberg aboard on the ISS in this microgravity science glove box experiment. And aboard the ISS, as was presented by the previous astronauts and cosmonauts, we are currently doing a lot of research. Among them is the search for a cure for the Armagen bone loss drug disease, There is hyperspectral imaging for environmental monitoring. There is candidate vaccines for many diseases such as salmonella, as well as golden staphylococcus. There is also candidate treatment for cancers, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and so on. One of the important things brought by space exploration are actually technological spin-off. So far, NASA and all space agencies have published more than 2,000 spin-offs in the field of computer technology, environment, agriculture, health, medicine, public safety, transportation, recreation, and industrial productivity. And all of them have important impact onto everyday life. And in this, you here have a very small clip of a man who lost his arm. And due to the development of automatic arms aboard the ISS to catch things in space, we are now able to create or to slightly recreate bionic arms using the myoelectric technology. And you see that this man is able to make complex movement with his fake arm. So this is one of the many outlets of space exploration and why it's fundamental for humanity. But that's not all. As previous speakers said, we want to go back to the moon and go to Mars to establish settlements, permanent settlements. And one of the key steps for that is feeding the people who will be inside those settlements on exomoons, on different moons and planets of the solar system. To do so, the Chinese Space Agency sent in January the 3rd, 2019, the China Chang'e-4 lunar lander that touched down the far side of the moon. And in addition to the lunar rover, the lander carried a Biosphere Experiment that you see here in the picture that contained 5 sets of plants and few insects for biodiversity. And actually, it was a huge success because this biosphere was put directly on the surface of the moon, and the Chinese team was able to grow a cotton plant. It sprouted on the moon, making the first time a plant has grown on the lunar surface. And this is the first step for producing food in an other environment than the Earth or the ISS space station, the ISS. So here we are almost able to recreate an artificial micro-ecological cycle. This will lead, we estimate that it will lead to an increase in food production by 200–300%. And of course, there is a huge reduction in terms of costs due to space use, soil erosion, and so on. No needs to follow. And of course, here it has direct impact for Earth preservation, such as reforestation. But that's not all. In astrophysics, we are extremely proud of this era because it allows us to test a lot of technologies and to test our theories. In particular, this is probably one of the most amazing picture, and I would say a small video clip. That is actually a clip made of 25 minutes worth of images taken from Philae. So just for a reminder, on November the 12th in 2014, the Rosetta spacecraft reached the comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko, and its lander, that was called Philae, performed the first successful landing on a comet. We try to picture that. We are able to land on a comet, and this is what you see. This is not a video from a past black and white movie. This is the reality that's happening on the comet's surface. And in 2018, the Hayabusa 2 spacecraft ejected 2 rovers on the surface of an asteroid. This is the name of the asteroid, the Ryugu asteroid. And you have the picture taken from the spacecraft. And this implies technological progress because we need fast engine to go very far in space. And this is here the solar electric ion thrusters, to which you have a description of the technology if you are interested in. My apologies. And what is the next step for us as humankind? Basically, to answer the big question, are we alone in the universe in terms of life form? And deep space exploration, as well as colonization and resource exploitation, are direct products of this research. Today, on the 16th anniversary of the Yuri Gagarin space flight, we have detected almost 5,000 exoplanets, meaning planets that are orbiting around another star, not the sun, but another star. And we think that about 70 of them are potentially habitable. Of course, to find traces of life in terms of microbiological life, not full humans or very weird aliens, no, just life in all its form, well, those chances are growing every year. And many ESA, NASA, JAXA missions are under study to push the limit of detectability. And actually, less than 2 years ago, signatures of water vapor has been found on one exoplanet. And you know that if you have water vapor, you may have traces for life as we know it, but we need further investigation. So if in the future, for the far prospect of space exploration, we find an habitable exoplanet with or without life, the question is, how do we get there? We, thanks to the Soyuz missions and all the technology that has been developed for the past 60 years, we are able to travel in space, but at what cost? If we try to reach the first accessible exoplanet, which is Proxima Centauri b, it's at 4.24 light years away from us. Using the most, and there is a conversion which corresponds to, as you can see, 10 to the 12 kilometers from us. It's a huge distance. So if we use the most powerful propulsion engine we have today, it will take us about 6 millennia to go there. It's of course impossible. We are discussing something which is impossible to reach today. But if you account for the development of modern propulsion as a function of time, here you have this plot of the, as a function of here, the speed in terms of fraction of the speed of light of all means of transportation, you see that it follows almost a linear growth. And it means that by the end of this century, we should be able to reach the closest exoplanet in few hundreds of years, according to extrapolation, of course. So how can we realistically envision such long duration trips with manned mission? This is beyond the life expectancy of one human. So we have to think ahead to prepare very long deep space exploration. If we only base our study on science-based technology, we have three options. One is what called sleeper boats, in which the crew is sleeping into some kind of artificial sleep. This is so far impossible. It has been successfully extended to 2 weeks of hibernation in medical, in clinics and medical hospitals. It has been done by Chinese experimental teams and reproduced by Israeli and Canadian teams. But so far, we can only sleep for 2 weeks. It will be not enough. Genetic arcs in which the population will be born from in vitro fertilization and raised by robots and artificial intelligence brings so many ethical problems that it's far from being solved. No, the only thing we can envision is what we call warships. And the warships, also known as generation ships or multi-generational spaceships, are large, hypothetical, autonomous spacecraft designed for crewed interstellar voyages that will take centuries to reach other stars. It's a slow boat. Well, you can say this is science fiction. This is completely ridiculous. This is science fiction. I would say that it's maybe you can take that and put it in the future for sure, but it's not fiction. Actually, the first ideas, the first calculations back from the fathers of modern astronomy, modern aeronautics, Robert Goddard and Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. They were already thinking about that a century ago. And nowadays, if it's common in TV series, it's much less common to study them correctly with physics, biology, and engineering. But it's not completely a crazy idea. Actually, in the 50s, the fathers of the Manhattan Project created and were funded for the Project Orion, a study of a starship that was intended to be directly propelled by a series of nuclear explosion behind the craft. So it's a nuclear pulse propulsion. And theoretically, it could reach within less than 100 years the first exoplanets. But the project was eventually abandoned, not because of technological impossibilities, but due to the partial test ban treaty of 1963. Nevertheless, in 1975, NASA and the Stanford University decided to investigate the case during a long summer study, bringing engineers, biologists, astronauts, cosmonauts, astrophysicists, and so on. And they led a concept study of a generation ship where the spacecraft consists of a 1.6 kilometers diameter torus that you can see here in this representation, and which turns on itself once per minute to create artificial gravity. And the idea was to accommodate 10,000 people. And this, you can here see in this, those schematics, you had agriculture on board. And you had different ways to produce energy and recycle oxygen, water, such as it is currently done on the ISS. In 2003, there was an international reflection for interstellar travel and multi-generational spaceships, resulting in a comprehensive book with the most up-to-date research. And today, there are numerous investigations, such as the 100-year Starship, which is a joint USA, DARPA, and NASA project that is funding the different agencies, private agencies, to create the first world ship by the end of this century. And many individuals and research teams are currently involved into development because it's extremely important. If you're able to sustain a population in space, then it means that you are able to colonize the moon, Mars, and any exoworld. But it also means that you are able to exploit and recycle resources. These include asteroid minings, but also simply any biological recycling procedures. And this is extremely important for deep space travels. So far there are simulations, that's the CIMOX simulation here, to create, to determine the constraints for settlement on the moon or Mars. But there are also various prototypes for huge spacecraft meant to travel space for hundreds of years. And if you are interested, we have recently published a nice review on the subject that you can have access here. But here, if we are discussing population in space, we are, well, dealing with futuristic question, but we can already solve or try to solve the problem because they will, as you can see, that we will see, have impact onto nowadays life. And the real question behind space exploration, manned space exploration, is the size of the population, because it will size everything else. How many women and men must be there to ensure the healthy survival in terms of biological, genetic, social, and soil properties of the species, and to allow for exploitation of the resources in space. As you can see from the size of the population, you will have constraint on food production, water recycling and use, oxygen, energy, in-situ resources, and exploitation. You will have also constraint onto the genetic health of your crew, the problem of consanguinity, if you are in space for more than one generation, overpopulation, such as we are actually facing on the Earth, new diseases in space. Cosmonauts and astronauts really know what is the dilemma with that, and the importance of cosmic ray irradiation onto the human body. And in addition to that, there are fascinating aspects that we cannot physically and mathematically model, but we can think about, such as language evolution in space, ethnogenesis, change in art, philosophy, religion, and the transfer of skills. To answer this question, we have created a project called Heritage, an international project created 4 years ago and directed in Strasbourg that is now gathering many astronomical observatories, as well as institute for biology, for human science, private companies, and so on. The code itself, that I will not present in details, is in C++ language, and it simulates any size of population of digital humans, and it makes it evolve in a closed system. So a moon colony, a space station, or a spaceship. For 1 year, 10 years, 100 of years, even 10,000 of years, and you can track directly the evolution of the population. It's a Monte Carlo type simulation that allows to test every possible scenarios that are brought by natural selection in life. And the ultimate goal is to determine the feasibility of interstellar travel and the human and architectural constraints associated with the multi-generational crew. If you're interested, you can have access for free to all our publications, and you can contact me for further details. But here you have the loop of the code, basically. You start from the Earth, and then you have a loop year after year where you have in your population procreation, change and evolution in genetics, consumption of water, food, and oxygen, production and recycling, social engineering, disease, accident, catastrophes, and death. And you can loop the simulation, create any kind of population, and see what's happening, and basically how your space settlement will evolve in time. I will extremely briefly present the quick results for a crew of about 1,000 people in space for 600 years. Again, a settlement somewhere on an exoplanet or inside a spaceship. And you can see in black the evolution of the population facing different diseases in time and catastrophes that are able to recover properly. You have the consumption in terms of kilocalories, so how much food you have to produce, how much oxygen, and how much water you need for the crew to stay alive in good health conditions. But the code itself allows you to investigate the genetics of your population. And this slide, extremely complex, is for those of you who enjoy biology. Those are haplotypes, heat maps of all chromosome 1 with an initial on the top and final bottom population after 600 years in space under little to no cosmic ray radiation. So we have a very efficient cosmic ray shield. And what we can see is that at the beginning of the simulation, you have here a completely random and accurate repartition of the allelic state. But after 600 years in space, you have recognizable allelic patterns with some allele favored by genetic drift. What it means is that if you intend to colonize space, the human who will stay on Earth and the human who will be in space for a very long time, many generations, will show deviation into their genetic patrimony. And this has fascinating consequences. But if we face more down to the earth consequences, and it will be my last slide, we can also estimate the costs for those future missions, the exploration of deep space. If we take again our crew of 1,000 people, we, thanks to the code, could compute the amount of, the agricultural surface area needed to feed everyone with a very diverse diet. And there is a need for 1 square kilometer of area using hydroponic, aeroponic, and conventional farming inside the ship. So including animals for biodiversity. To water everything and to feed the crew with water, you need millions of liters of water per year that you have to recycle, if not to create. You need almost 1 billion cubic meter of oxygen, and you need centripetal artificial gravity, housing, propulsion chambers, specific equipment, and so on. So, thanks to the code, we can estimate that if you have a cylindrical architecture with a radius of 200 meters, your spaceship must be more than 1 kilometer long. So it gives you an architectural constraint onto the size of those futuristic missions. And then how do you give energy to your spaceship or to your colony? Well, first you need solar panels inside the solar system, but most likely nuclear propulsion or nuclear energy, because it's much, much more efficient than solar panels. Then you have to account for repairing and maintaining your spaceship or your colony. And engineers have calculated that the number of components that may be replaced is about 3 per second for a 99.99% reliability of your spaceship. Because you have 3 repairs per second, you need artificial intelligences to help the human on board of those large missions. Then, how do you create those missions, those settlements, those spaceships? Well, you can, with this cylindrical architecture, you can have a very naive, very crude first, zero orders estimation of about 10 to the 13 tons of metals. To produce that, it's by far more that we can produce on the Earth in 1 year. So it means that space mining is required, such as mining, say, Psyche, the asteroid, that contains more than enough iron on it. Of course, this leads the way to space economy. We cannot have a deep space exploration or space settlement without having a space exploitation, then space economics. And talking about economics, what will be the cost of such a mission? Well, again, from very, very crude estimation, it will be 10 to the 16 euros. And if you take into account that the French gross domestic product, the PIB in France, in 2020 is about of the order 10 to the 12 euros, that means that you cannot have such initiative today in France, and certainly not in the worldwide. But if you take into account the positive trend in global GDP growth, not accounting for 2021 because of the pandemic, such an enterprise on an international level, so the world would have to collaborate, this will not be possible before the 22nd century. So basically in about 100 years. So it gives us the future, at least some ideas of space exploitation and how space industry has to evolve in order for us, human, to colonize and exploit the solar system and worlds beyond that. Thank you for your attention.
Спасибо большое, Федерик, за такую интересную подробную презентацию. Дальше выступает доктор Ян Темел, руководитель лаборатории CubeSat Университета Люксембурга. Ян, вы здесь? Здравствуйте. Ян Темел. Не слышно. Включите, пожалуйста, микрофон.
Sorry. Добрый день. Спасибо. My name is Jan Thurman. I'm a senior researcher at the University of Luxembourg. It's a great honor for me to speak here at this anniversary of the first human space flight. I would like to talk to you about the research and the education we do here at the university regarding CubeSats. And that is not a human spaceflight topic, but it has enabled thousands of students to participate in spaceflight. And in this sense, it is to me a very human spaceflight. But before I go to that, I would like to give a few words about the history of space in Luxembourg. Luxembourg is known today for the space resources, and Larry Krutko, he will speak about this. Well known for using resources on asteroids or moon in the future. But this history in Luxembourg is quite old and quite successful, and it's all started in 1985 with the founding of SES, the Société Européenne des Satellites. At the time, the commercial director of that organization said SES had no money, no frequencies, no regulatory approval, no satellite, no launch slot, no TV channels, no clients, no research equipment, and no viewers. Otherwise, everything was perfect. At that time, Luxembourg was not a member of the European Space Agency. It had no space law. It did not sign all the treaties, but it was already fully focused on commercial space. It's a success story. Today, SES is among the leading satellite operators and is providing 2% of the gross domestic product of Luxembourg. Today, Luxembourg focuses on new space and on space resources. And that is a consequence that it was so known for financial services, but during the crisis in 2008, the financial crisis, Luxembourg realized that they have to diversify. So they started the Space Resources Initiative. And they were focusing on startups that have a focus on return on investment. That could be in short term, and then we deal mostly with small satellites, CubeSats, or long term, for example, for the use of space resources. Luxembourg also started two important events: the New Space Conference that takes place in fall usually, and the Space Resources Week that will take place next week. And Luxembourg realized it's great to have these startups here, these activities, these conferences, but they also need to educate their own students here in Luxembourg in their new university. So in 2019, they started a new interdisciplinary space master at the University of Luxembourg. And we teach, and I'm one of the lecturers there, we teach a mix. 50% we teach non-technical subjects, business, law, entrepreneurship, and 50% we teach technical subjects, satellite communication, robotics, system engineering, CubeSats. And last year, Luxembourg opened the European Space Resources Innovation Center, and Luxembourg also started, in addition, other space education activities. For example, the very popular Act in Space, organized by ESA and the French Space Agency called CNES, or we also participate now in ESA's CANSAT activities that are even smaller satellites. And again, it allows so many people to participate in spaceflight that I would think that the astronauts, Yuri Gagarin, would be happy that now space is accessible to so many people. Coming back to the university, what we teach. We teach around 4 major topics, around 4 major laboratories. The one is our concurrent design facility. Here we gather the students, assign them different tasks, and ask them to design an innovative spacecraft. We use a method here that is practiced by the European Space Agency, by NASA also, and by the International Space University. And we participate in certain challenges. That's what my colleagues do. We also do a lot of research and education for satellite communication, and that has its heritage in the research that we do for SES. It's actually core competence of the university. But we also do an internal project with CubeSats. And a very spectacular activity in laboratory is our Lunar Lab. We have an analog facility here. It's right under me where I'm sitting now, and we have a rover. Actually, we have several rovers now where my colleagues do research for navigation, for distributed autonomy of rovers, so that mobile devices, rovers, will be very, very common in the future on the lunar surface. Over my research is about CubeSats. And I'm sitting right now, I'm sitting in the CubeSat lab. And it's all new here in Luxembourg. So that 12 months ago, or say 18 months ago, that was a library still. And then we have started to remove all the old stuff. And then, so step by step, build a first version of our laboratory here. The CubeSat lab is the facility that you see behind me or in the screen. But it's also a course that we're giving on CubeSats over 3 semesters. And I will talk a bit about this in the next few slides. And it's also a research discipline. That is then what I do with some co-workers, where we think where could CubeSats, small satellites, be very, very powerful. So the laboratory was erected over the course of a year. And it's all brand new. And we're still exploring what exactly we would want to do in this laboratory. Certainly, we're preparing here for the first Luxembourg CubeSat mission. There's a lot of people working on it, myself, technicians. Most important here is the contribution of our students. We now had our first cohort of students, and that you just see there. They're now about to finish the first year, and now they go to look for jobs in Luxembourg or in the world. And when they were learning with me, we looked into a mission for CubeSats. In the first 2 semesters, I gave them a task to design a CubeSat mission. But I didn't want to have the students play. I don't want to have them designing an experimental mission. No, I gave them a very difficult task for a scientific application, something that addresses something that is burning today in the world. And not only that, I asked them that this mission shall have a business potential, because that is Luxembourg's signature. So I gave them this. I gave them these 5 requirements you see on the right-hand side. And I want them to measure the soil moisture in the world. Why soil moisture? Because almost everything in this world depends on the hydrological cycle. Agriculture, power generation, recreation, everything is linked to water. So then I gave them also some further requirements, more practical requirements. How often shall these measurements be taken? What shall be the resolution? How old shall the data be? These typical requirements that you need to design a good mission. And they succeeded. In the 3rd semester, then I go with the students right here in this laboratory where I'm sitting now, and then we're not doing the theoretical stuff anymore. Then I have them touching a CubeSat to have them getting a real grip on the technology, that they really understand what satellite technology is. So what did they come up with in the first 2 semesters? They came up with a mission they called Goldcrest. Goldcrest is a little bird, it's the national bird of Luxembourg. It is a 1-unit CubeSat with 1 deployable panel. As you can see, it chose a suitable orbit, and they found out that a lot of the data that is acquired needs to be processed on board. And we selected a method that is for this remote sensing, for this Earth observation mission, that is called GNSS reflectometry. It has a lot that is very new and has a lot of advantages over classical Earth observation technologies. The mission is not over yet. I have still a student looking into what if we sold that data, how much money could we make, and can we make more money than the satellite actually cost? And I'm very curious to find out if that's the case. The second students now started, and they coined their mission daffodil. That's a flower, a narcissus that is inspired by its reflection of its own view. These new students, they built upon the Gold Crest mission that you saw on the last slide. So the orange bar here, that's the last class of student. They did first the mission assessment, then a preliminary design, and then these laboratory exercises I talked about. And their report, I've been giving that to the new students, and now they design the Daffodil mission. And I make it a bit harder for them. So in the second semester, not only designing it, no, I also want them to do a simulator. So they will also have their fair share in challenge. And I gave them again 5 requirements. This time it's not soil moisture, it's the mapping of the inland water bodies. And you realize, again, it is a water topic because water is so important on the Earth. I gave them some complementary requirements, for example, that they shall measure or map inland water bodies in the northern latitudes only, and they shall have a mission duration of 2 years instead of 1. And the data latency shall be 1 month, not a week. Sorry, 2 weeks, the latency, and they shall create a map every month. Similar, but not the same, so that they can build upon, but also be built upon the old achievement, but also be creative and innovative themselves. And that is, this research of the students is part of my personal research. I do then research concerning CubeSat system engineering. I would like to make these satellites smaller, hence cheaper, hence more accessible for future generations. I would like to make these satellites fly in formation, like birds fly for a common purpose. I picked that formation flight topic because I got inspired by a Russian researcher, Daniel Ivanov from Moscow. He wrote a fantastic paper that was telling me that is a useful thing to do. And of course, I use that for remote sensing technologies, GNSS reflectometry again. And that's what's shown on the bottom here. If you fly a number of satellites in formation, you could actually have a very, very powerful Earth observation method with very, very small satellites. So the research is well interwoven with the teaching that assures that the students learn something that's up to date, and that the research can benefit from the achievement of the students. With that, I thank you very much. Thanks for your attention. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Большое спасибо, Ян, за такой интересный и подробный доклад. Следующий выступающий Йон Лейф Йоргенсен, профессор Национального института космоса Датского технического университета, который расскажет о космических полетах сегодня, исследованиях и перспективах. Йон, вы на связи? Йон Лейф Йоргенсен.
1 second, I'm trying to unmute. Hello everybody. I'll just start my presentation here to see whether, hope you can see it. Let me see whether I can get this to work. Start share. Okay, can you see the screen now? Do you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good show, thanks. Yes, what I've been trying to focus on is the work we've been doing on in space research and space technology in the past 30 years here in Denmark at DTU. At present, I have more than 100 satellites, space missions using my technology in space at various places. So I've tried to collect what we do know and what we do miss to get to the next stage. So this is space travel today and where we are going. The first thing you will note is that access to space is a basic problem we have. we have to get out of the gravity well of the Earth. And the gravity well of Earth is, even though we think it's deep, it costs a lot of energy to leave the Earth system. The Earth-Moon system is a very tiny gravity well compared to the one that it takes to get it away from the sun and out to deep space. And once we get just on the other side of Mars, which has a very shallow well, we get into the gravity well of Jupiter, which totally dominates the space outside the sun, except from very select few places. It's amazing to think that this is the case if we consider that we were living on a planet just twice as big as it is now. None of our rockets would have been able to lift off from the ground and bring us into space. As it is right now, the technology that we do possess is just barely capable of lifting us off the ground and into space. And that is one of the big problems we have right now. The rocket evolution is one thing that we need to improve, and I very much cherished the first presenter we had from Roscosmos rocket evolution on the commercial side. It was a very nice presentation showing that there is a hope that things will get better in the future. But the basic problem is that as we try to lift off from the Earth and go into space, the first thing we have to overcome is, of course, the gravity of the Earth. Then we have to go through the Earth atmosphere. And finally, we need to accelerate the spacecraft to get into orbit. If we do not do that, we'll just fall down again. So we really need to pick up speed. And the speed we need is about 26 times the speed of sound to just get into orbit around Earth. That equates to a velocity increase of some 8 kilometers per second. So that's the way we normally think of getting into space. We simply just have to accelerate our spacecraft to that velocity, and off we go. The problem is that it takes almost all the mass of fuel we can have in the rockets. The rockets are relatively big. Here I show some of the recent crewed launchers that has been used. Obviously, the most reliable of them all, you see here to the left. And then you see the Saturn V. It was twice as big as is the present technology. The shuttle was somewhat wider, but still small compared to what you see here. And only recently, the Falcon 5 has been able to lift off people from the ground. So they are all in the relatively large size. The problem is that these rockets need to get awfully big in order to get just even a few tons into low Earth orbit. And a few tons is, well, I mean, a few satellites now. It's not CubeSats as we heard before. Then you can take a lot of these with you. But if you want to go to the moon and beyond, we really need to take many tons out there. And this is just the American attempt right now. This is the Block 1 of the Space Launch System. It's the kind of size of rocket, the same size as the Saturn V, it takes to get people back to the moon. And just for comparison, you see the Falcon 9 here, which is capable of bringing people now to the International Space Station. And here you can have here's a small collage just showing the various rocket types that has been tried right now. You know, the Ariane 5, which is a European heavy lifter. Starship is the one that Elon Musk is presently trying to do. The space shuttle has been retired. The Ariane 6 is a new European attempt. The Falcon 9 is somewhat higher, but also slimmer. Inadia, the old Russian workhorse. And then you basically can go on to the very large rockets here. Those are the ones that eventually can take people back to the moon. So that is one of the problems we are facing right now. That is, how can we bring the cost of this down? And the biggest problem is really that all of this is based on kerosene and LOX technology, or most of them are. Actually, the most reliable of them is the RD 170 and later on the RD 180, which is now the workhorse used to energize the Atlas V, one of the big expendable launchers of Americas these days. So these motors here were technologies developed back in the 60s in Russia, and the American equivalents have actually been given up. The later, much later Merlin rocket, which is a reusable engine, is the one that powers the Falcon 9. It has 9 of these motors on board, and as you go down and land on the landing pad to reuse the first stage, you will need only 1 motor to still be power positive during your landing. So this technique here of reuse, of course, is one way to take down the cost. The problem is, we now know that the space shuttle was retired mainly because the cost of refurbishing the engines, which was the most complex engine ever made for spaceflight, costed only about 5% of it could be reused directly. For that reason, it was given up. It was simply too expensive to refurbish a space shuttle to go into flight again. So you can also question Elon Musk in his philosophy here on the landers. It is true that the tubes that you use can be reused. How much of the engines he can reuse, we don't know. But the fact is that the fuel of a launcher doesn't really mean much. It's less than 1% of the cost of a launcher is the fuel that goes into it. So fuel economy is really not a problem here. It really is about the technology of the motors, whether they can be reused. And at presently, at least as far as is in the public press, the only reused motors we can get are the Merlin motors right now, but we still do not know how much of the motors can be reused. A qualified guess is something like 10% only. And that means that the most costly part of a space launcher, namely the motor block, as you see it here, is actually still the driver for the cost of going to space. Russia has been fantastically good at doing and maintaining this technology, but it's still only about 100 bars in pressure in the combustion chamber, and is still running on turbo pumps that will be worn out after a single launch. And that means that it's hard to think of this going to be really reusable in the same way as we think of, for instance, an aircraft. So that's problem number 1 we need to solve in the near future. In space, as soon as we're in space, a lot of new stuff has actually evolved in the past tens of years. Mainly the ion motor has changed the name of the game. The ion motors that we flew to the moon here on a mission called Smart One was actually delivering something like 2,500 seconds in specific impulse. That is the efficiency of the motor. And that turned out to be really a successful to go to the moon. We used 46 kilos of fuel to go from low Earth orbit to lunar orbit, which is totally different from what it would take to go use conventional energy. It just took us 3 months to do so. And we were cheating. We did not use just the ion motor. We did also use the gravity of the moon to actually take us up all the way. Of course, you would do that if you are a bit smart and have the time, but this is not for human spaceflight. 3 months to the moon is out of the question. So the ion engines are going to change what we are going to see in the near term travel. A lot of ion engines of various classes and types are being developed right now. We used a Hall thruster, which was originally developed in Russia and later taken over by SNECMA in France. And we and that worked like a charm going to the moon. So that's the second technology that we need to go deep space. If we want to bring a couple of 100 tons to Mars, there's no doubt that we will bring the habitats to Mars using an ion drive to get up there. It might take us 5 years to go there, but it's so much cheaper to do this than just to do it straight. So the next thing where we have had huge advances recently is in the robotics of space. This is partly smartness of instruments. It's partly also because we now started to learn what does it take to make a computer reliable in space. old space technology, like one of the very famed missions to the moon, was actually operating on almost no intelligence on board locally. All the intelligence was sitting on the ground, and it took a lot of commanding to keep traveling for the, I think it was 27 years collectively that it managed to make it on the moon. So this technology, while robust, without the intelligence, it's hard to get much out of this. So the technology we are trying to do here is based on new advances in computer technology and couple that with instrumentation. Right now, we are driving this little beast here on the surface of Mars. It's the Perseverance rover. We landed it up there just a couple of weeks ago. It's the most advanced rover NASA ever did. It's almost autonomous only because we had to have all the oversight taken up by by machinery on the ground. I did develop the camera that is guiding this instrument. It's called Pixel. It's a X-ray spectroscopy microscope. It sits out there at the arm of the rover, and we are going to operate this autonomously in the night. So inside this, I built in full 6 degrees of freedom control of the instrument, such that we can maneuver the robotic arm over the rocks in the night on Mars. I think I have an artist impression up here, how they think we are doing this. It's now night on Mars. We have the noctiluminescent clouds that we expect to see up there. And since it's 100 degrees freeze outside, or 120, we cannot drive because metal gets brittle at those temperatures, so we stand still. And then we get to operate on all the night. What it really looks on Mars is actually different. This is what the landscape we landed in looks like. This is an old seafloor. There has been a shallow water sea, a lake of kind here, Jezero crater. And what we are going to do is to drive up a delta formed by a river that once flowed into to feed this lake. The purpose of this mission is, of course, to study, has there ever been life on Mars? So that's a prime objective, and that's what we're doing. This little camera I developed here, NASA has claimed to be the most intelligent camera ever launched to Mars. The remaining part of the rover is semi-autonomous only. We have, for instance, the little helicopter we dropped on the ground a couple of days ago, and here we give the propellers its first spin, and it was actually the plan to have its maiden flight today. This little helicopter will fly around and follow like a dog on a leash with a rover, so we can see what's in the surrounding of us. And but the landscape of Mars is kind of unforgiving, and it takes quite some intervention from humans. We do not dare to drive this autonomously. Just look at what the landscape looks as down here. That is where we are right now at an overlook. We had to stand back because when this guy is actually flying, we have to be more than 100 meters away from it. So that's the status, that's the state of the art, what we can do right now with autonomy in space. And this is as far as it has been taken. I do not know of any mission that has so much autonomy on board when it comes to dangerous maneuvering. But let me take you to another of my missions. That's the Juno Spacecraft, which is presently orbiting Jupiter. Jupiter is ways away from Earth. We have typically more than an hour of lifetime getting signals back, radio signals back from this mission. It's a pretty big spacecraft, and my equipment sits out here at the boom. With this one here, we actually have to operate in totally automatic mode. Nothing can be reprogrammed when we are working out there. So everything has to be autonomous. Again, I developed the autonomous star cameras that sat out here. On the way to Jupiter, we actually happened to map the interplanetary dust particles that the spacecraft encountered. We just heard about the mission to a foreign solar system. And this dust here is actually kind of interesting to do. But this is just to say that this kind of autonomy that we have on board here is actually just what's the present state is. So what's in the future here? Before we go there, let me just give you a little treat on the measurement principle that we are using for a mission that we developed back in 2000 together with Jet Propulsion Laboratory. That's a NASA laboratory in California, Deutsche Luft- und Raumfahrt, which is in Germany, and then Airbus, and then us. And we developed two spacecraft that looks like this. They're 4 meters long, so they just look like any other Earth orbiter. What we wanted to do was to do formation flight between the one satellite and the other. And the measurement principle is as simple as this. If you are bicycling, say that you and your best friend is out bicycling here, and you are at this position, your friend is here and you are here. As you drive on, and if you are stepping equally hard in the pedals, you will keep the same distance at all times. A little later, you come to a small depression in the soil. That means that the forward bicycle accelerates. The bicyclist on the forward bicycle gets a little ahead compared to the bicycle driving behind, and that distance will remain until as you get up again. Now the speed will be the same, but you have gained a little distance relative to the backwards driver. That will last until the bicyclist at the rear here enters the same trench, and then you will get up and have the same distance as before. This technique we use here because a dip into the surface is just like a dip in the gravity field in front of us. So what we did is that we built a spacecraft that simply just measures the distance between the two spacecraft to about a micrometer, 1 billionth of a meter. And doing so, we can now measure the gravity variations of Earth. And it works so well that we can actually measure how much water people use at various land masses. So right now, this actually mission has been used to map the water resources of the world and where it's depleted and where it's gained. And it is also measuring ocean circulations, of course. And it also, but most importantly, we continue this measurement with the next mission called GRACE Follow-On. Right now, this is the resource mapper number 1. So that's a new technique you could do using the technique we call formation flight. And that's just the start of a totally new game for spaceflight. There's a lot of missions you can do using formation flight. Traditionally, you make telescopes having the forward focusing element, focusing the rays to the backwards collector. That's a typical telescope system with a boom in between or a tube or something else. But you can actually do that by free flyers and make much bigger telescopes. And that's actually one of the techniques that we are going to see change the world for space science and for Earth resources as well. Last thing is, what do we need to get to people to the moon, and what do we need for getting access to the moon, also for resource utilization? To launch from Earth costs you about 9.5 kilometers per second in energy, if you will. To go to cislunar, the cislunar transport that is going from the Earth to the moon, about, depending on how much time you use, 4 to 8 kilometers per second. Again, it doubles the cost. The lunar landing itself is actually relatively cheap, and the lunar launch is also relatively cheap. And the cislunar transport back is actually cheaper to Earth. And then, of course, you need to do a re-entry, which is relatively cheap. So all in all, we need to have rockets that are twice as capable as it is to launch from Earth in order to get to the moon, and then you can only land a small fraction of that. So instead of doing that, another technique would be to get launch, deliver your hardware in a low Earth orbit, and tug it to the moon using a special drive unit that takes you up there. That's a technique that's being developed by a lot of countries these days. That's to the moon and back. So how do we get further? Well, the next stage would be to be able to do rendezvous and docking fully automated. Right now, we can do rendezvous and docking between space segments like the International Space Station. We have seen the Soyuz dock to the space station many times over. And that's, of course, a very simple operations. But to build a spacecraft that goes to Mars from segments that are launched from Earth is actually a lot harder. So that's the next stage that we are working on. That is simply formation flight that enables you to assemble larger space structures, for instance, out of the Lunar Gateway, and that would be the launch system to Mars. So that's where we will go next. Presently, we are at Mars with this rover, so it flew there, Mars 2020, landed up there. We are now selecting, with the help of the instruments on board, the samples that we want to deliver. The samples will be delivered as easy to pick up stations. ESA will then go up with a NASA launcher and deliver a little rover that will go around and fetch all these samples, bring them to a small pad, and on that pad there will be another rocket that is returning the samples to orbit. And once in orbit, we'll have to bring it home. And up in orbit, a European spacecraft is waiting to bring the capsule here at the tip of this rocket back. Presently, we are developing this rocket. We are developing the fetch rover that you see here, and we are developing the spacecraft that have energy enough to fly to Mars, grab this thing here, this little canister, and bring it back to Earth. That's the present stage of the technology today. But we will see huge changes in space technology and the capabilities of space in the coming years due to these three things: cheaper launchers, cheaper or better rocket motors, high reusability, space tugs, full autonomy in space, in operations. So that's pretty much what the future holds for us. So, спасибо.
Спасибо, что так интересно посвятили нас подробности программ изучения Датского технического университета. Мы всегда благодарны вам за то, что вы приняли памятник Юрию Гагарину на территории DTU Space. И нам крайне приятно, что мы сегодня тоже имеем возможность с вами сотрудничать. Я хотел бы предоставить слово Анжелике ван Омберген, координатору исследований человека Европейского космического агентства. Анжелика, вы подключены, вы нас слышите?
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I'm just trying to share my screen. But this does not seem to work. So I click share screen and then, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me here to speak today. So I work at the European Space Agency as a science coordinator for human research, and in the next 10 to 15 minutes, I would like to give you a little bit of an overview of our human research activities. So just very briefly to my personal background. So I did a PhD in medical sciences at the University of Antwerp in Belgium in 2017, and I'm a visiting professor there since 2019. And my PhD was focused in particular on how the brains of astronauts adapt to spaceflight. So during that time, I had the opportunity to work with European astronauts as well as Russian cosmonauts as part of my PhD and postdoc research. Apart from my academic, let's say, work, I also engage in a lot of science communication. And I'm currently the author of two children non-fiction books, one on the human brain. And you can see a picture as well here, which has been translated also in Russian. So when it comes to SciSpace, which is a team that I work in, SciSpace stands for Science in a Space Environment. We of course do a lot of research into the different risk factors that we have in spaceflight. So there's altered gravity levels, such as micro and partial gravity. There's cosmic radiation, but also psychological aspects such as isolation and confinement. Depending on which risk factor we want to address and that we want to do research on, we have different platforms in which we can address this. So the SciSpace program has a quite large portfolio when it comes to ISS work, but also ground-based platforms. And you can see each of the different platforms here. And depending on the risk factor, you can see that we have different platforms to address the research. So when it comes to micro or partial gravity, for human research, we have the capability of doing certain ground-based studies, such as bed rest, dry immersion, parabolic flight. Of course, we have the ISS, which is not a ground-based model, but where we also do biomedical research on the astronauts. And in the future, we will also participate to Gateway, which is a lunar orbiting station. And of course, there we will also do a lot of research. For radiation, we also have specific platforms, and then in particular for these psychological aspects for isolation and confinement, we also do several studies. For example, we participated in Mars 500. We will also participate in Sirius, both with our Russian friends and colleagues from the Institute of Biomedical Problems in Moscow, where there is a facility where we can do long-term isolation studies. In the future, ESA will also lead its own isolation studies, and we also do research aboard the Concordia station, which is a French and Italian-led station, research station at Antarctica, and where ESA is also participating with biomedical experiments. As I already mentioned, in low Earth orbit, we have the International Space Station, and in the future, we will, of course, also have the Gateway available for human research to do there. Here you can see an overview of the different, let's say, research areas that we focus on in the SciSpace team. So we have physical sciences, we have biology, we have human research or human health research, and we have radiation. And of course, I mean, I'm coordinating the activities in red here, so more focused on human health. But within our SciSpace program, we have a lot of different aspects that we look into, and there's a wide variety, let's say, of aspects that we consider. When it comes to the human research program we have on board the ISS, we've been engaging together with NASA, but also with Roscosmos and our other international partners. We focus in particular on specific aspects, and these of course are related to the risk factors and to what we know that these risk factors induce in the human body. So we have done or supported research that looks at aging, cardiovascular issues, the immune system, muscle and bone, muscle atrophy and bone demineralization, neurophysiology, nutrition, and so on. So we have a wide variety of different topics that we address, and a lot of our studies have already yielded important results for the overall community and for the literature. Apart from the research we do on ISS, as I already mentioned, we have a lot of ground-based platforms, and these ground-based platforms are also really important because they allow us to mimic or simulate certain aspects of the space environment, which then also help us to translate the knowledge we get from these to better prepare our astronauts for human spaceflight, and to also translate certain findings to a terrestrial population, such as certain patient groups, elderly, bedridden patients, and an immobile, let's say, population. So we do, for example, bed rest studies where we put participants in bed for 5 to 60 days for each study. And you can see on the right-hand side of the slide an overview of the bed rest studies that the European Space Agency has already funded and set up. And you can see that there's a wide variety in the number of days, but also in the countermeasures that we've been applying. So with countermeasure, we mean something that we apply to try and counteract or to minimize certain changes that we see in the human body. And you can see that we focused in particular on different types of exercise, on nutritional supplements, but also with regards to artificial gravity. And this is actually a program that we've also, or that we will also extend upon in the future. So ESA has quite ambitious artificial gravity program. So we have short-term human centrifuges, which can be used to simulate, let's say, gravitational exposure. So we do that in combination with a bed rest study to see whether artificial gravity can be an efficient countermeasure for future human space missions. So in 2019, we already participated, or we set up a study together with NASA and DLR in Cologne in Germany, where we looked at a 60-day bed rest study. So we had participants in bed for 60 days long, and we applied artificial gravity for 30 minutes each day as a countermeasure. From this study, even though the results are only preliminary, we can see that 30 minutes of artificial gravity, which we did at 1 GZ level, is not sufficient to counteract the detrimental effects that spaceflight might yield. So we will expand upon this in the future with a 60-day bed rest study in Toulouse in France, together with our colleagues from CNES, where we will combine artificial gravity and exercise as a countermeasure. In particular, we will look at bike ergometer exercises. And we will also do another study in Planica in Slovenia, where we will also do 60 days of bed rest, and we combine artificial gravity and exercise, in particular vibration exercises. Another new platform that we have at ESA, or that we will have at ESA, is dry immersion. This is a model that is very well known and very well exercised already with our Russian colleagues. So there's a lot of expertise in Russia and in Moscow in particular on how to set up this model. For ESA, it will be the first time that we will set up our own ESA-led dry immersion study. We will do this at the Space Clinic in Toulouse in France, together with MEDES and CNES as well. And this is, of course, a very interesting model, because also here we can simulate certain aspects of physiological changes that we see in the human body that look very much like what astronauts experience aboard the space station. And the good thing about dry immersion is that you need a shorter exposure to see the different kinds of changes that you see in bed rest and space. So in this first study, we will really try to validate this model, and we will also include 20 female participants to get a better understanding of how the female body reacts to these extreme situations. I already mentioned our isolation research, and of course ESA is very happy to collaborate with our Russian colleagues on this. So on the right hand side you can see the NEC facility here. This is a facility that is located within the Institute of Biomedical Problems in Moscow, and it allows us to set up certain mission scenarios. For example, the next Sirius mission will be an 8-month isolation study. So we will have 6 crew members who will be, let's say, isolated for 6 months in this complex, and they will simulate a lunar mission with its different phases and different scenarios. And of course, for us, this is very important information because we can derive directly lessons from this to better prepare our astronauts. This is also a picture from Concordia station. I already mentioned it. This is a research station that is French and Italian led, and ESA is participating with some biomedical research there. The nice thing of Concordia is that it's a very high fidelity environment. It's also very isolated, it's very confined, and it's a very extreme environment. So of course, the biomedical research we do there focuses on both the psychological, but also the physiological aspects. And also here we can directly derive from these results and these studies that we set up there, important lessons for our astronauts for future missions. Lastly, I wanted to mention, of course, that within ESA we have a very strong collaboration with Russia, and in particular for the human spaceflight aspect as well. So I think I highlighted a few of the collaborations that we have been focusing on in the past and that we will focus on also in the future. And of course, we hope that we can maintain this very strong collaboration with Russia as well. Lastly, I also want to show you a little bit the research opportunities that we have. So if you have a specific interest or you know specific science teams that are interested, then please have a look at this slide as well, because this shows how these teams can get involved. So we work in 2 different ways. So we have announcements of opportunity, which are basically ad hoc opportunities that we open whenever we have a possibility to implement certain research. This is the case, for example, for bed rest, dry immersion, Concordia and isolation, sounding rockets, our radiation program at the GSI, and also ISS studies. And in complementary to that, we also have continuously open research announcements, or CORAs. This means that they're always open. So whenever you have a good idea, or you know a science team that has a good idea, you can have a look at our website and you can just apply and submit your proposal, which will then be peer reviewed. And if it passes a certain science merit threshold, it will then be assessed for further implementation. We also have other capabilities where we try to, let's say, focus on a multidisciplinary and international collaboration. So we have topical teams, for example. These are sort of a think tank where scientists can band together over a certain problem or a certain narrative, and they can then have a look to try and propose something to ESA or make a specific recommendation to us. So you can see the links here where you can find this full overview of our research announcements. So if you have an interest in anything, please have a look at the website, or of course, you're also more than welcome to reach out to me so I can pinpoint you to the correct pages. And then this is my last slide, which I think is very appropriate for the current, for today. So of course, we are celebrating a very nice event. It's the 60th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's first flight into space. And of course, he laid a very important milestone for the future decades of the men and women who followed in his footsteps. It's a very pity that, of course, we need to celebrate this day in a pandemic, and that we cannot meet together and really have the celebration that this would deserve. And I really hope that we will be able to, for example, at the 65th or at the 70th anniversary, have a bigger celebration for this. So thank you very much, spasiba. And if you have any questions, also please feel free to reach out. So my email address is listed here. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. And I do apologize in advance, but I will need to leave to give another presentation at another event in 5 minutes from now. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое, Анжелика, за интересный доклад. Коллеги, продолжаем конференцию. Эмиль Арентов-Мосикьяев, журналист, бывший колумнист издания «Политики». Эмиль, вы нас слышите? Эмиль.
Yeah.
Очень хорошо.
Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. 2 seconds. Yes. Hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the organizers for this conference and for inviting me to say a few words about why I believe that we humans should work towards a future in space. And also a big thank you to my fellow speakers for sharing their knowledge about this fascinating subject. I want to start out with a quotation from 1962 that I'm sure most of you will know. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and to do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. The words are, of course, from a speech given by President John F. Kennedy, who was shot and killed only a year later. Now, why am I choosing to open with the words of an American at a conference that has its roots in the Russian side of space exploration? First, it serves to highlight the limits of my own knowledge, because as I don't speak Russian, I'm sad to say that I know more about the American experience. And I therefore appreciate this conference for giving me the opportunity to learn more about the Russian side of things. But there are other reasons as well. President Kennedy's words are from a time when our struggle to reach the stars was just as much a struggle against each other, the so-called space race between the Soviet Union and the United States. Now, it's not like national rivalry doesn't still play a big role, as there are many strategic interests and huge amounts of national prestige at stake. But at least for me personally, the partnership and cooperation that exists today between not only Russia and America, but other countries as well, is proof of something important. That unlike in 1962, when Kennedy said his words, we now know that if humanity is to have a future out there among the stars, cooperation isn't just a good idea, it's a necessity. Therefore, the quote is not just a reminder of how far we've come since then. For me, it also underscores the importance of putting aside our differences and working together. It also sums up another important point about this whole field, that the exploration of the universe and eventual colonization of other worlds is the greatest challenge that we humans are ever going to face. one that not only requires joint effort and collaboration, but also raises an important question that I'm sure that many of you have been asked on numerous times. I know that I have. That is, why on earth should we do it? Why is it worth it? Why should we pour hundreds of billions of rubles or dollars or euros into the vast emptiness of space when we have so many problems facing us right here on planet Earth? Why not focus our time and energy on these issues and then turn our attention outwards when they're solved? Before I answer these questions, I just want to quickly introduce myself and my reason for being here. My name is Emil. I'm 31 years old and I work as a journalist. About a month and a half ago, I wrote a column for the Danish newspaper Politiken, where I argued for the continued exploration and colonization of the universe. And this column is the reason why the organizers of this conference asked me to speak. Before studying journalism, I spent about 5 years in the Danish military, and as a soldier, I've been deployed to Afghanistan and Western Africa. But unlike you, at least many of you, I don't have a scientific education. In the army, I did train as a combat engineer, but that mostly involved blowing things up with explosives and finding mines. So I'll leave the, should we say, technical details of space exploration to those of you with the relevant education background, and then focus on the more humane aspects, like historical, psychological, and even philosophical reasons why I personally think we should do it. But you know, that's the great thing about the cosmos, right? That it has the ability to fascinate us all, regardless of our background. And also, space is also just simply too incomprehensible, in my view, to be covered by simply science or the humanities alone. We don't, no, we need to look at it from different angles to even begin to understand it. It's not enough to focus only on numbers and hard data, or to simply let your imagination wander when you look at the stars at night. It's when you combine these two things that the cosmos becomes truly magical and has the ability to inspire us all in ways like nothing else. And that's where I come into the picture, because as a journalist, I'm...
И вот как я, то есть как я журналист, я рассказываю истории. И для меня персонально это космос, это завлекающее, потому что он содержит все. И все это из хорошая история. То есть огромные риски и самые огромные награды. То есть это наше будущее. И, конечно, мистика в этом. Я думаю, что последняя часть более важна, чем вы думаете. В нашем современном мире
scientific facts.
Где мы не видим, мы думаем, что мы уже поняли все, узнали все. Но тот эффект, как, например, как черные дыры или путешествие со скоростью звука, доказывает, что до сих пор для нас все это мистика, все силы Земли. То есть многие у нас, у которых есть научная основа, но для таких людей, как я, это просто пример волшебства. Каким космос может быть. Если мы хотим, чтобы то есть люди дальше поддерживали это финансово, они должны быть также заинтересованы этим, как и мы.
I
Если
personally see myself as
журналист могу написать о космосе, и я, чтобы завлечь людей, я уже считаю это успехом. Но для меня, мне нужна тоже помощь, чтобы рассказать эту историю правильно. И, астрономия, инженерная или... И многие об этом могут мечтать. И лучшие истории — это те, которые могут, те, кто могут сказать, это я пережил это. Где мы, то есть, помогает нашему воображению, заинтересовывает людей в этой области. И это, опять же, возвращаясь к моему вопросу, почему мы должны это делать? Почему мы должны исследовать и колонизировать? В моей статье было несколько аргументов. Один из аргументов это в будущем, это важно для выживания нашей цивилизации. Пандемия короны показала нам, что это может произойти, что может быть, и люди нас пытались предупредить, что это может произойти. И, конечно, не возникает вопросов, что Вселенная — это опасное время. Много лет назад, когда астероид упал на Землю, и были массовые разрушения. Может быть, и не произойдет завтра, но это просто вопрос статистики. Но если мы узнаем это вовремя, мы можем предупредить это и будем подготовлены. Нашего присутствия в космосе и результат этого мы вложили необходимое время и энергию в изучение. Если мы немножко не будем думать о будущем, а вернемся в прошлое, то есть в Африке цивилизация, представьте, что наши предки делали, может быть, то, что мы делаем сейчас, что у нас много проблем, и мы будем оставаться здесь, а только потом мы обратимся в космос, Но в этом случае, я думаю, что мы бегали бы в Восточной Африке, потому что многие проблемы, они уже перед нами, они более на нас давят, чем абстрактные какие-то. Но вопрос эволюции и переехать на другую планету. И тогда нас ни пандемия, ни война, ни катастрофы, они не смогли нас пока полностью... И если нам перестанет вести в будущем, в далеком будущем, и наша планета, на нашу планету, например, упадет астероид. И смогли бы мы распространиться уже в другие мира до этого, как это произойдет. И наши предки, они сделаны теми людьми, которые мы сейчас, то есть для расширения пространства, расширения наших знаний. И самое важное, что для этого, это, то есть пионеры, космонавты, астронавты, которые запрыгивали в огромные ракеты и исследовали космос. И мы уважаем то, что эти люди сделали для нас. И наши следующие поколения, они будут тоже рады, что мы положили какую-то основу, то есть путешествия в космос. Даже если какие-то вопросы есть по поводу того, что есть ли в этом необходимость. И как я и начал с цитаты, я хотел бы закончить другой. Автор Кларк, который написал «Одиссею», который вы уже знаете, Вселенной. Он сказал, что есть две возможности. Или мы одни во Вселенной, или нет. И мы боимся, то есть пугаемся обоих возможностей. Я с ним согласен. И если мы одни, одинокие моряки на космическом корабле, и это не только будет вопросов нашего выживания как людей, но также наша обязанность, что мы должны убедиться, что это отличная возможность, что нам, та жизнь, которая нам была дана, мы ее просто не выбросим. Это означает, что мы должны лучше позаботиться о той планете, которая нам была дана.
But it also means spreading
исследовать ресурсы и также расширять жизнь на другие мира. Чтобы мы знали, что жизнь будет также существовать через тысячи или миллионы лет. То есть большой вопрос, но для меня это вопрос того, что космос делает. И по моему мнению, поэтому важно использовать время на исследование. И мы не должны это только делать для нас, для себя. Мы должны сделать это для наших детей, для детей наших детей. Не для наших, то есть для будущих поколений. И поэтому по моему мнению, мы должны продолжать. И спасибо, что слушали. И если вы захотите когда-нибудь послать журналиста в космос, вы всегда можете ко мне обратиться. Спасибо большое.
Спасибо, Эмиль, за интересную речь. Очень так познавательно. Всегда приятно общаться с журналистами. Вы много знаете и много пишете, и нам приятно это читать. Спасибо. Мортен Буматсон, Университет Копенгагена, ассоциативный профессор Института Нильса Бора. Мортен, пожалуйста.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for the invitation to speak at this.
Спасибо большое. Спасибо за ваше приглашение. Хотел бы вас всех поздравить.
Jubilee of the space flight, and I'm very honored to be invited.
Для меня это честь быть приглашенным.
Thank you. So when I was invited, I told.
Когда меня пригласили, я говорил, о чем я делаю, и я исследую Марс уже примерно с 95-го года. То есть я работал на миссии НАСА на Марс. То есть в данный момент я работаю в миссии сохранения. Я хотел поговорить о современных проблемах астрофизики. Я хотел бы вас предупредить, что То, что как бы это было уже затронут вопрос, одни ли мы, то есть часть вопроса и часть, то есть именно исследование нахождения жизни, других проблем, воды, жидкой воды. И сможет ли вода существовать в космосе в жидком виде? И экзопланеты были найдены. В довольно-таки больших количествах. И это и мы узнали, что одна из 10 планет имеет Млечный Путь. И это означает, что более чем 10 и 9 планет, которые возможны для проживания. И примерно 15 тысяч этих звезд, они находятся на расстоянии от 100 звездных лет. И это что-то мы можем исследовать в экспериментальном. И в Дании у нас есть центры исследования, где мы занимаемся исследованием экзопланет, и также исследование биологических знаков в университете Орхуса, и также в техническом университете и в университете Копенгагена. Я сижу пару дверей от тех людей, которые занимаются исследованием экзопланет. Моя главная задача — это Марс. И я уверен, что меньше чем через 10 лет у нас будет возможность проверить, то есть узнать существование планет, которые похожи на Землю. То есть, например, минус размера как Марс, то есть и показывает, что Земля — это что-то особенное. И мы ищем что-то особенное, то есть в каком-то на экзопланетах, чтобы посмотреть на существование. И так как я работаю на Марсе более 30 лет, я со многими познакомился. Я встретился с Митрофаном, который ньютроспектометр на последней миссии «Одиссея». Я до этого не встречал, но очень интересно как бы появление русских друзей. И также на миссии в 1999 году. Это миссия на Марсе тяжелая. Но где мы уже можем видеть знаки, и это все объекты мы будем изучать геологию, атмосферу, и искать потенциал в астробиологии, но не только биологического интереса, но, например, подсчет крейтеров, и подготовить дальше как бы для человеческого существования. Это просто это карта кратера, которая показывает то есть она почти 35 метров и имеет 2 внешних канала. И они проверяют, то есть проверяет, вода была, и, скорее всего, по измерениям больше, чем 250 метров поток. И к этому, то есть сама цель миссии — собрать экземпляры и потенциал, то есть нахождения биологии, и также изучение древней атмосферы Марса и Луны, как это было раньше. Поэтому это просто примерные потенциальные образцы, на что мы собираемся потратить марсовый год, чтобы для собирания этих образцов, то есть от дельты и до гор, где мы будем собирать больше образцов. В миссии используется много инструментов, которые уже немножко были вам показаны здесь. У нас есть ведок, это норвежский. У них есть, то есть стереокамера, научная стереокамера. И в полете это будет главная камера, которая будет использоваться в нашей миссии. В данный момент они работают, то есть над этой камерой. Это швейцарская, это как швейцарский ног. У нее много разных возможностей и по пикселям. И Джон немножко говорил о пикселях. Это инструменты, я очень хочу посмотреть, это инструмент в работе. И на данный момент инженер, то есть сам вертолет, на чем мы фокусируемся. И мы ждем тоже как бы с начала работы инструментов. И также показать различные элементы суперкамеры. Камера с зумом, с увеличением. Увидеть возможности какие. И вы увидите тоже как бы эти снимки на заднем плане. Показывает нам небольшую часть того, что вы видите на дистанции. Это самый как бы зум, огромный зум, который можно иметь на камере. И у нас есть также калибрация, то есть это небольшой инструмент, который показывает спектр камеры. И мультиспектральные снимки. И при использовании различных световых условиях, и вы можете видеть это, что когда это работает, вот эти вот 8 кружков, которые находятся вокруг. Потому что то есть, пыль с Марса, она более магнетическая, и поэтому мы можем содержать центр чистым. И поэтому нас попросили именно сделать такое устройство. И также вы видите, то есть наши будущие смотреть это, собрать образцы с Марса для того, чтобы исследовать их на Земле. И мы также добавили и последнее предложение: присоединяйтесь на основных языках. К сожалению, русских пока недостаточно было. Это новые снимки, которые были сделаны. Мы не близко уже к этому, мы не можем подойти близко. Но солнечная энергия, и мы надеемся, что мы скоро видим, что он полетит и сможет улететь до 100 километров и сможет сделать снимки. И это также сделаем, что как бы будет исследование, будут проведены эксперименты и эксперименты инженерии, где будет электролизом и СО2, которые будут собраны с атмосферы, где они переведено было в кислород, и исследования, космические исследования. И чтобы подготовить, чтобы нужно до 40 тонн кислорода создать, чтобы человек смог работать. Это также другой эксперимент. И мы в течение, может быть, последующих пару недель, когда вертолет пролетит, мы посмотрим, то есть можем увидеть, есть ли кислород на Марсе, и уже дальше как бы уже человеческое исследование, будет исследование Марса человеком. Спасибо за то, что слушали.
Спасибо, Мортон, за интересный доклад. Конечно, языки рабочие — это английский международный, не все говорят по-русски, мы это понимаем. Поэтому и сегодня мы сделали конференцию на разных языках с переводом на английский, французский, русский, чтобы всем было комфортно общаться. Но, конечно, если мы будем сотрудничать, мы все перейдем на английский язык, который мы прекрасно все знаем. Спасибо большое за вашу презентацию. Коллеги, дальше слово предоставляется Оле Хартнак, руководитель лаборатории Термо, Дания. Оля, вы с нами?
Yes, thank you very much.
Добрый день.
My name is Sul Harnak, and I'm a senior project manager at Terma.
Меня зовут Самант, я главный технический руководитель Термо. Спасибо большое за то, что мне дали возможность представить, дали мне возможность представить информацию на этой конференции. Я производственный менеджер, начал работать 15 лет назад, и справа, то есть часть, которая находится на модуле Колумбуса.
Terma is a Danish space company.
То есть мы космическая компания, которая с опытом по 70 лет, и у нас уже было примерно 75 миссий. Мы начали в 1972 году. В основном мы занимаемся электроникой и пауэр-системами, и более в космосе и на Земле. Я хотел бы немножко поговорить о научной основе, которая стоит за этим, то есть инструментами, тестированием, запусками, какие у нас, то есть по времени проекты и результаты. То То есть то миссия сегодня.
Above thunderstorms, starting at around 10 kilometers.
Мы смотрим на грозовые штормы, которые происходят на высоте 10 километров и попадают в космос. Также мы видим красные, которые находятся наверху, которые самые интересные феномены, на которые мы смотрим. И у нас миссия ТЛС, и также эти взрывы, они дают и справа вы видите видео, эти спрайты, которые происходят в Аляске. И тоже, которые дают нам данные того, что происходит. Это снимок был сделан в Оклахоме 2019 года. И также снимки с космоса, которые нам уже показал Андреас Могенсен, который был сделан с ИСС 2015 года, который также помогает научным работникам при дизайне операции. ESIM — это огромный космический проект, который был развит принимали участие более 200 инженеров из Польши, Норвегии, Испании, Италии. В оригинале они делали на 2 года эту миссию, она уже функцирует 3 года. Мы видим результаты, которые мы получаем с данных. И также мы смотрим уже о еще расширении ИСС. Мы в ожидании, размерами 122 сантиметров и масса 314 килограмм. И 200 ватт. Она покрыта, то есть множественными, поверхность покрыта, и мы также видим здесь 2 инструмента. И первый из инструментов ММИА — это модулярный который состоит из 5 free photometers, которые записывают, делают записи 100 тысяч измерений в секунду. И внизу у нас есть 2 камеры, которые сделают видео 12 снимков в секунду. Если мы посмотрим с другой стороны находится компьютер. И спереди у нас есть MXGS, модулярный N-гамма сенсор. И также мы видим внутренние части, также маленькой энергии, детектор плен. И за этим у нас есть высокой энергии сенсор. И впереди, и вокруг детекторов у нас есть космическая, то есть защита от космической радиации. А впереди маска, которая возможность, чтобы, то есть возможность с нами получения хороших снимков. Сзади у нас компьютер, который собирает и содержит информацию. И также там блок, блок питания. Если мы все это уберем, это основной компьютер, который дает информацию через Columbus модуль, и также блок питания. А наверху, то есть адаптер, механический SS-адаптер. И адаптер имеет интерфейс для астронавтов, когда они ходят по поверхности, и рука-робот, которая будет в будущем. Здесь у нас есть фотографии, которые вы видите с 2018 года. Пару месяцев после инсталляции на СС. Небольшие видеозаписи молнии и шторма, которые также дают нам измерения с 3 различных спектров. И также во время шторма мы также видим то есть детектор, который получает информацию, и мы видим ту считанную информацию. То есть небольшие, то есть где они рассчитывают, и небольшой, мы получаем около 70 показаний. И если вы посмотрите на низкоземной орбите, внизу, и также ИСС, которая, около экватора, также мы видим грозы. Если также мы посмотрим на грозы, и первый раз увидели в Миннесоте в 1909 году студентами. И они видели, что как все эти мероприятия были интересными, и были изучены ИСа в 2005 году. И это было успешным, поэтому мы дальше начали работать над инструментами, которые и над электроникой, которая могла бы быть использована. Где мы производили, то есть мы исследовали и payload. И все клиенты, пользователи ACES, они дали нам условия для ИСа, для того, чтобы Термо был основным контрактором, и мы поддерживаем CDTU Space, и также университеты, которые их поддерживают, например, университеты Бергена, Валенсии. И также развитие изображения и сенсорики.
For the test and verification of ASIM,
для тестирования и верификации Airbus предложил нам их место, где мы сможем проводить эксперименты. И BUSOC, также центр в Бельгии, которые помогают общению. Мы с ними общаемся каждодневно с 2019 года. И для запуска мы общались с NASA, с Boeing, in SpaceX Dragon. И Falcon Line поддержка.
Testing ASIM in Germany, in Munich. So, for instance, mechanical and physical properties test.
Производительные в Мюнхе. Например, тест электрорадиации для того, чтобы мы смогли совершать полеты с АИС и с НАСА. У нас были небольшие проблемы пересылки в Америку, но так как из-за того, что содержали радиацию, но из-за того, что мы не могли это переслать на самолете из-за содержания радиации, нам не разрешили перевести на самолетах, поэтому мы перевозили на грузовиках. И также вопрос интеграции в Dragon Trunk. Справа видите людей, которые принимали участие в полезную нагрузку, в сам которые помогали загружать в грузовик. У кого зеленые шапочки, это НАСА, а в оранжевый это те, кто, например, извне, например,
Dragon was integrated on top of the Falcon 9 rocket and ready for launch at the...
После этого мы уже интегрировали на верхушку Falcon 9. Опять же, с помощью Андрея Мусона мы и Хьюстона были поддержаны, то есть сетью, с сателлитами. И вначале у нас были проблемы, чтобы найти для того, чтобы передавать видео, то есть видеоимиджи на Землю. Это было запрещено властями НАСА. Поэтому нам нужно было инсталлировать огромный компьютер, который смог бы получать...
Data now goes through white sands in the US to Europe, Germany, over Pfaffenhofen.
Перевоз отсюда в Германию, куда была переведена вся дата.
The science scenarios we are running, and data then is sent to the data science center at DTU here in Lyngby.
И дальше уже дата была передана в ДТУ в Копенгагене, центр даты. Они криптировали всю дату и дальше, также в Норвегию, в Бергене, в Норвегии,
data and discoveries from the ASIN data. And in January 2020,
и также в журнале «Наука» в январе 2020 года, первая из этих снимков попала на главную страницу. И главный исследователь это Торстен Нойборд, и также которые помогали в исследовании, Николай Özgod.
This year, also we,
и в этом году также нам удалось поставить снимок на главную страницу. Тоже снимок, который был сделан Андреасом Мортенсеном. Я очень рад, что я мог дать такой инструмент, который привел к такому успеху. Который смог помочь, сгенерировать, сделать такое большое научное мероприятие. И если у вас есть какие-то вопросы, я готов на них ответить.
Спасибо, Оля. Очень интересный доклад. Мы обменяемся все электронными почтами для того, чтобы можно было совершенно спокойно задать вопросы и пообщаться с коллегами из Бельгии, Франции, Люксембурга и России. И я думаю, что мы найдем общие точки для сотрудничества. Слово теперь предоставляется Андрею Алексеевичу Ведерникову из Свободного университета Брюсселя. Андрей Алексеевич, вы
Now it's Андрей Алексеевич Ведерников from the Free University.
Слышно меня?
Отлично, отлично.
Спасибо. Прежде всего, well, I will continue in English as most of participants talk in English. So many thanks for the organizers for giving to give such opportunity and greetings.
Многие уже сказали спасибо за возможность.
Микрофон, Андрей Алексеевич, отключили. Нажмите на клавишу. Микрофон. Отлично.
Today I'll talk a little bit about quite particular problem.
Сегодня я немножко поговорю более о такой определенной проблеме, в котором мы сделали определенный прогресс по поводу моделирования и образования зародышей планет в космических экспериментах. Я из Москвы. Я провел 10 лет в университете космических исследований и также в Свободном университете в Брюсселе в Бельгии. Я хотел бы вам сказать довольно-таки интересный факт. Николай Федоров, кто основал именно вопрос, и Циолковский,
Some time together with Korolev And so this is
И насколько я знаю и помню, что Циолковский работал с Королевым. То есть это как бы передача знаний. И я надеюсь, что эта встреча будет не только просто передачей знаний, но также даст как бы интерес, продолжение или начало работы в индустрии, научной индустрии. Циолковский, он подумывал о использовании микросилы тяжести. Наш центр исследований в университете Брюсселя также именно для таких, создан для таких типов работ. И этот центр, он был создан Пригожин и был инициатором. И Жан-Клод был тоже основателем. И этот центр занимается различными проектами, и мы принимаем участие в интернациональных проектах, которые фокусируются на том, чтобы найти механизмы, которые относятся к ранним стадиям протопланетарной планетарной формации. То есть вы здесь видите снимок эволюции вот, в левом верхнем углу. И также через формацию диска вокруг молодой звезды. И это небольшие частицы, они передвигаются, соединяются друг с другом и создают большие объекты. И переходят, уже более трансформируются в астероиды и в планеты. И большой вопрос, который еще не полностью обследован. Как эти частицы, микрочастицы, формируют довольно-таки крупные объекты диаметром 1 километр. Это происходит довольно-таки быстро. Быстро на уровне астрофизики.
Known mechanism is Brownian motion because these small particles float in.
Движение Броуна — это известный механизм, который образуется в атмосфере. Если мы посмотрим только на этот механизм, довольно-таки долгое время занимает формация больших объектов. Но нам надо, то есть, тоже иметь опыт, как они соединяются, или это какие-то другие механизмы, они приводят к такой эволюции. Мы работали с нашими коллегами например, с технического университета, которое лидирует профессор Блум. И вы видите, как вы здесь эксперимента.
10 centimeters.
Это все было в реальных размерах. Сверху вы видите
that are dispersed by rotating a cogwheel, and by inertia they are transformed into a chamber.
Пудра, которая уже дальше идет, перерабатывается и переводится в капсулу. И параметры этих выбраны и для симуляции, как это есть в реальности. И чтобы быть ближе к цифровой симуляции, и реалистичная как бы самой пыли, которая более подходит к прототипу пыли. Потом, когда это вводится, закрывается.
And it should not be perturbed. It should stay at rest, and using the optical observation system that is supposed to observe how the agglomerates form. Definitely it is impossible to do on Earth because the pressure is rather...
И когда они собираются, мы уже смотрим, как они формируются. И, конечно, очень тяжело это сделать на Земле, потому что давление очень низкое, и это очень, как бы, они формируются очень быстро. И самое, как бы, смотреть уже, идти на микро силу притяжения. И в макро силе притяжения довольно-таки долгое, как бы у нас получилось довольно-таки долгое наблюдение. И также у меня есть различия в температуре в каждой камере. И тогда, как бы, чтобы облако, оно уже передвинулось, отодвинулось.
Our task was to prevent,
То есть наша задача была, чтобы облако не ушло, и таким образом мы решили тоже несколько других интересных задач.
Do you see me? Here is a,
Вы видите, это символичное облако, которое было в камере, которое довольно-таки примерно такого размера. И первая цель была, чтобы это облако, его не сдуло. Это первое. А второе, нам получилось передвинуть это облако с уважением к оптике и сканировать различные стороны. Чтобы посмотреть, то есть, со стороны оптики с хорошей резолюцией. Потому что у облака вот такие размеры, кубических сантиметров. То есть квадратный миллиметр примерно 200 микрометров. Самая сложная задача была увеличить концентрацию частиц в облаке. Это шарик, наполненный водой. И это тоже симулирует, показывает, что произойдет с облаком, если, например, подействовать на него. И, то есть частицы, которые в облаке.
Like a liquid incompressible fluid, like water. So if we
как под компрессом, like water. То есть если мы нажмем, так легко. То есть если мы нажмем так, тогда оно будет скомпрессировано таким образом. Если с этой стороны, тогда облако, оно поменяет радиус. Тогда мы развили оригинальную систему, которая нам позволяет именно сжать облако. Вот как это происходит. 7 электрические модули, которые разрешают менять температуру с различной температурой, с определенной периодичностью. Как мы это создали. Мы используем систему колец. Мы сможем сжать облако в любом направлении. И эта сила двигает частицы hot to cold areas. Здесь вы видите симуляцию, которая показывает температуру с холодную на горячую, и тогда облако, оно двигается с горячего на холодное в 3 направлениях. Это показывает, что происходит в камере. Для того, чтобы протестировать в башне Бремена 150 метров. 5 секунд падения, то есть 9 секунд свободного падения. То есть устройство в капсуле. И здесь вы видите эксперименты, как облако себя ведет в режиме сжатия. И после успешных тестов нашего оборудования провели эксперимент в Швеции, и здесь вы видите агломераты, которые очень близки к тому, что предсказали, то, что было предсказано симуляцией. Полные оценки анализа и окончательные результаты будут также представлены. Мы думаем, что мы всегда должны быть готовы к встрече, к тому, чтобы увидеть необычные результаты и к радости. Спасибо большое.
Спасибо большое за интересный доклад. И у нас, в принципе, мы ждали доклад Ларри, Куйко, который не смог поначалу подключиться, но пока он не выходит с нами на связь, я хотел бы анонсировать итальянского спикера, который записал видеообращение и презентации своего доклада. Это Роберто Тоскано, представитель Третьего университета Рима, когнитивные направления для глубокого космоса или для глубинных, может быть, каких-то слоев космоса, если говорить правильно по-русски, с английского делать перевод. Здесь ситуация в том, что, к сожалению, Роберто поздно прислал сегодня, именно в день конференции, свою аудиозапись, и технически тяжело было это все интегрировать, но я предлагаю всем заинтересованным лицам оставить свои электронные почты для того, чтобы конференция не только была научно-популярной, но и мы могли бы отправить вам презентации Роберто, какие-то, может быть, вопросы и материалы для дальнейших коммуникаций с специалистами космической отрасли России, Бельгии, Италии, Франции, Люксембурга и Дании, естественно, в первую очередь, поскольку мы являемся инициаторами этой конференции. И поблагодарить, естественно, всех вас за то, что вы присутствовали, уважаемые коллеги, сделали замечательные доклады. Как показала практика, вот эти горизонтальные связи между несколькими странами, они более востребованы в научном, профессиональном, да и любительском сообществе. По крайней мере, можно понять, что сегодня представляет российская часть, насколько разработки актуальны и интересны, а в космосе они, безусловно, интересны. И мы слышали доклад генерального директора Дмитрия Владимировича Главкосмоса, там колоссальные технологии, которые, в общем-то, являются на передовых позициях в мире. Ну и наши коллеги из стран Европейского Союза показали, насколько глубоко они занимаются космической тематикой, насколько они сдерживаются, так сказать, вот этих также основ, в том числе исторических аспектов, которые были заложены полетом первого человека. Об этом упоминал неоднократно и Андрес Могенсен, первый датский космонавт, который сейчас в Хьюстоне работает в НАСА над проектом. И его коллеги тоже многие упоминали. Здесь, конечно, вот эта школа от советской, да, к российской уже космонавтике, она очень интегрирована и с европейской космонавтикой, и с астронавтикой Соединенных. Вот все вместе, таким образом, мы с вами отмечаем сегодняшний день, праздничный день, день космонавтики, день первого полета Юрия Алексеевича Гагарина в космос. Спасибо большое всем, кто принял участие. Я благодарю вас как руководитель Русского дома в Копенгагене, представительства Росsotrудnicheства, и мои коллеги также, которые являются руководителями домов в Люксембурге, в Бельгии, во Франции, Италии, передавали всем очень большой привет и свои также поздравления. Спасибо за внимание. Остаемся на связи, не прощаемся. Доброго дня и доброй недели всем.
Спасибо, thank you. До свидания.